Morning, everyone. My name is Sanita Pram, and admin lead for this campus. You're all at the auditorium, JRD auditorium, which is located at Think Campus, Electronics 2, amenity block, second floor. And in case of any emergency, you're requested to evacuate the auditorium using the exit doors. You have exit doors. Please take the stairs and move to the safe assembly area, which is located at the block ground floor, hit ground. So that's about the brief. And request photography is restricted at this campus. Not to take any photography with the mobile. And just to brief you about the campus, this campus, overall area of this campus is 10 acres. And the built up area is built up area is 6 acres and 4 acres landscape. And we have 4 towers, B1, B2, B3, B4, and amenity block. Thank
Now to start the session, I request Vinayak Gods to DSCI CEO DSCI to come and inaugurate this function uh, to give a brief idea. So he is part of DSCI, the responsible for promoting security in India, linked to product security, security research, startups, ecosystems, etc. So I welcome Vinayak Gods.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Tata Consultancy Services, for really hosting this sub summit on product security. Some of you and most of you will be knowing this is homecoming for me. I started my private sector journey with TCS in 2006, right? And I worked in TCS consulting practice. Then it was started in cybersecurity. There's a called as global consulting practice in cybersecurity, which I happen to be that initial team who started that particular consulting practice, and I think 2008. So this best practice mate is 15th best practice mate. Even before DSCI was started, DSCI's foundation date is today, 22nd of August. So we are also completing 15th year. But Bangalore has a very good relation and good contribution to what DSCI is and the origin of DSCI also, right? So initially, I remember there was a thinking that as the IT industry is growing and they are serving the global geographies, right, in Europe, in US, many other geographies as well. So security of data and the things that we have been doing from India remain as a very important concern, and that concern led to so NASCOM has started a lot of other initiatives, but as a part of NASCOM. But the thinking which emerged like we should have a very specific focus initiative to take care of security and privacy, but that has to set up in such a way that it has a little bit arm's length relation with NASCOM, and that's why it was in a way kind of an initiative which is like an independent not-for-profit company set up by NASCOM to look at the cybersecurity and privacy in the country, basically, right? So initially, way it was started as a not-for-profit company, and initially we started engaging with a lot of those ITITS company. I came from ITITS company. Most of people in DSCI was also from ITITS company. But as it was started as a independent company, we started seeing digitization is not only limited to the global geographies, right? And we started seeing a lot of digitization push coming in India. And 2009 is the year we all know that UID was started, and that started aggravating a lot of concerns about the privacy, concerns about the security. A lot of digitization started coming in different industry sectors, basically, right? And that's why we started making ourselves more relevant and industry also more relevant to what DSCI is doing. And entire our membership base now is very distinct from NASSCOM. So we have almost country's top 15 banks. Most of them are member of DSCI. All the key oil energy company now member of DSCI. So is the product companies, digital product company I'm talking about, or power sector organization, or airport infrastructure, or health sector organization. So our membership is now increasing in critically in the user segment of the industry, technology user segment of the industry. Although those norms now, most of the companies which are in the user segment, they don't like to call themselves as a user companies. Means there was a very critical quote which I heard from somebody as good as a SBI. They are a technology company, happens to be doing banking business basically. So each of us had been now investing in technology. We are building products, and if I see from overall way the digitization and technology transformation happening in country, there are 4 to 5 things that we see. One is that every sector is economic sector is digitizing, right, and they are adopting technology and they are pushing themselves to digitize. And digitization, as we all know, we simplifying for the understanding is we all have been trying to improve the experience of consumer or customer with digitization. We try to improve the productivity, and at the same time then we try to create a new possibilities out of it basically. So experience, productivity and possibilities is something that simple term, and every economic sector is doing that. So I recently was working with the oil energy sector, and the ministry recently published a vision document for oil energy companies, and it talks about why the India's petroleum energy company has to go for digitization. There's a vision document they talked about, and they have even tell against the global peer how Indian companies are lagging. And the ministry is talking, pushing them to go for digitization, go for innovation, and even go for public cloud adoption, which is never heard of 5 years back basically. So there was a Minister of Home Affairs policy, NISPG, National Information Security Policy Guidance, which restrict organization to go for the cloud. But now government itself is showing that you should go for the cloud basically. So these economic sector, including oil energy, we all know airport infrastructure, right? DG Yatra for that matter, and many other things that airport does. So that sector is going digital, health sector is going digital, banking sector we all know. So this economic sector going digital, and this push is coming internally for productivity, and also the push is coming from government as well, that you need to improve the productivity. For example, the oil drilling productivity can significantly improve. Almost 57% improvement can happen if they go for more analytics driven understanding of the business basically. So that push is coming. So every economic sector is going digital, right? And we also know from our own understanding, apart from these economic sector I talked about, energy, power sector, or many other sectors like this, there is also important second plane of understanding of digitization is the transaction processing industry. And this is a paper some years back, I think 2014-15, we had been working on this paper of how do we improve the financial inclusion in this country. And there was a paper, some of you might be recalling this paper, it was called as JAM paper, JAM Strategy to Digitization, right? There is a bank account like Jandan account, and then there is a for Aadhaar, because everybody has identity, and M for mobile, right? So that has a strategy which was thought about as a strategy which will solve a lot of those challenges of the economy. And we all know that large part of economy is still very cash dependent, still very informal. If you try to make the transaction more formal, it improves the economic prospect basically. And then that led to push for a lot of digitization, and then most of the transaction processing industry nowadays, digital is a critical mean for them basically to do the transaction, and they are doing their own, they are investing a lot of their own, so that's happening. But the very third important plane of understanding digitization in this country is, apart from what they have been trying to do, so there is also a strategy we brought, right? Globally, there are 3 strategies for digitization that everybody first has been talking about. One is US strategy, which talks about mostly private sector led innovation to digitize the different transaction, this different part of the economy, right? And that's what US is known for. And then there is a state intervention strategy like China, which is a very strong state intervention strategy. And then Europe, we all know this is a very end user driven or human right driven kind of strategy. So there are 3 narration of globally in terms of digitization. And we have our own problems. Our problem is inclusion, our problem is scale, our problem is the cost of transaction basically, and so many other things that basically we thought about. And then the idea that we put together by this Aadhaar, we extended that idea to set up this this interface, right, which is called as the UPI. And this is an intervention, architectural intervention in governance ecosystem. And this has really changed the way the transaction processing happening in country, right? We brought this high value, low volume digitization of transaction to low value, high volume digitization, basically, right? So this paradigm change happened because of the interface that we, an architectural intervention that we tried to bring in terms of UPI. And it's very democratized and participatory, because we have not thought like some years back that the Google can help us to initiate the transaction, right? So somebody like Google is there, somebody like PhonePe is there. So it's not only the architectural intervention, it's also its ability to connect to the lot of legacy as well as the upcoming innovation, basically, right? So this is a fourth narration that we had given to the globe, that you can achieve the digitization with this, basically, right? So this is the third important plane in terms of understanding digitization happening, right? Fourth important thing, which is like India, as we know, that almost 100 plus unicorn, right? So the digital first companies, Flipkart and Ola and many such companies, basically, right? And these digital first companies had been using digital as a mean to start, initiate and do business, basically, right? And that's also another important thing that we look at. So this is also very important to understand from the overall digitization perspective, right? And then another key plane that we see happening now, because we engage with now a lot of critical sector organization, we engage with defense forces as well. So the modernization of such a sector like a defense is also one of the important plane to understand from the digitization perspective, right? And so these are five key dominant Indian specific kind of contexts if you try to understand the technology and evolution of technology, especially digitization push which is happening, basically. And because we have the capability, we have research, we have the engineering capability, a lot of global companies are coming here, right? Means we are doing with this conference, we are doing a GCC meet as well. I mean, there are such summit happening, and one is GCC. So a lot of global companies are doing cyber out of India. So we do this cyber security secure in India, basically. There are hundreds of companies who are doing cyber security out of India, basically, right? So it's not only the Indian segment; it's also the global need of security, global need of digitization, basically. So almost $44 billion is the strength of this industry in India now. Cyber is one part of that. So that industry is also significantly relying on India for their innovation, engineering, and all of those digitization requirements, basically. And we know that our own industry is also serving global requirements, global digitalization, technology transformation requirement. So all of these elements are now hinging on, right, is value added thing, right? So we are increasingly looking product as a way, digital product as a way to so many things, basically, right? Be it serving a particular specific requirement of the end user from the transaction processing perspective, to really looking at the digital product which can solve very intense problem, basically, right? So the product are becoming very important element of all of these kind of planes I just talked about from digitization perspective. Even somebody like a services company also have very dominant products, basically, right? So for example, even TCS, Infosys has very some of the dominant products, basically, and those dominant products have been paving way a lot of those possibilities for the organization, basically. So and then we know that we are coming to the age where the things are becoming more digital things, basically. So everything that we have would have its own digital avatar, right? Or digital kind of structure or character, basically. So that is there. Then the security of product becomes an important part, and that's why product security is an area. I mean, we had been hearing the disciplines of security, a lot of disciplines of security, but when you talk about product, there are a lot of things which are coming in terms of product security, because so many disciplines of security comes together. It's very intense security work. It's very intense effort that you need to put together, because many of the time nowadays the vulnerabilities which is coming from the products are increasingly putting a lot of liabilities on the organization which are building those products, basically. So recent presidential directive US, which talks about product vendors are responsible for the vulnerabilities. Basically, you are just fixing liabilities of product vendor for the vulnerabilities that products has, basically, right? So this influence the entire product industry, which is in the place now and which will become very significant industry in coming future. India is a product destination that people talk about. There's already a lot of effort that we as a government of India has been putting together, and also the industry is also responding to that. A lot of effort and impetus is being given to deep tech industry apart from the digital first industry. So this nation, with strength of the services capability, now moving towards putting a lot of value to the product, and not only for your own product security, is also I'm seeing a lot of possibilities are there, service possibilities there to secure the other products, basically, right? A lot of global work of product security happens out of Bangalore and Pune and those kind of industry, basically. And we are doing this small meeting on product security, and we thought that as one of the idea to take it for the best practice meet, which is every time it is more theme driven. This year it is emerging tech is a theme. So take some of those interaction to drill down deeper into that, and that's why this product security sub summit was thought about. We thought 4 other such summits. So there is one which is happening on GCC. There's one which is happening on automotive and hardware security, and one is happening on because increasingly we are looking security requires a research intervention. So there's one which is happening in IIIT Bangalore, which is on a security research and how can we productize that security research. And there's another one which is not known to people, so which is happening like we have some of the investors are hosting us, like we are hosting partner like this. Some of the investors are hosting our startups and getting 20-30 investors, and there's an investor pitch session which is happening as well. So this was the idea that we initially floated that we'll go on different campuses, get people there, discuss about that particular area, drill down that to the extent that we need to, and we are really happy and thank you for entire community here to supporting and helping us to set this up, and really thank you TCS to help us hosting the product security summit, sub summit, and really join me to big band to TCS to really welcoming us and doing this, and thank you Ketan, Sonata, and Samir and other team involved into this one, basically. So in a day today, we will dwell down into different areas influencing and shaping the product security as a discipline. We'll talk about different dimensions involved in this. We talk about what people are doing in product security. Sometimes we may also need to understand what do you mean a product security, what it goes to develop and to think about the product security, and what it makes basically in terms of the product security, and how different organizations are doing. And product security for different region is different thing, basically. So there's a software product. We will have Ravi here from Philips. We'll talk about most of the products are devices, right, and hardware products, basically. What it goes for hardware product. There's something that will be talk about in SCADA OT. So there are a lot of different dimensions when it comes to product security, basically, and will try to dwell into that in the engagement. But when we are doing this, we would like to make this more engaging, and this setup is more engaging kind of a setup. Please feel free to intervene, ask question, add to the observations that and comments that we have been making here, and let's try to capture this discussion together so that we can try to create some good elevation and good focus on this particular competence, because somehow skill required product security is very different than a typical application security network security work that we have been doing, basically. So some of these things we need to also take it to the other ecosystem. For example, we may require very specific capabilities, skills, and we may require to take it to the academic institutions to develop skill that could feed to this kind of work that we have been doing out of India, and for our own product and for the products that we are securing for other clients as well. So with this, thank you, Samir, and thank you, TCS, for hosting us here. We can start with the other sessions. Thank you.
Hello. For the next session, we have a keynote speech by Ganesh Subramania, who is Global Head Cybersecurity, Cryptography, and IoT. So let me welcome Ganesh Subramania.
there are a few locations.
Good morning, and thank you, Vinayak, for setting the context and the introduction for today's event here, the Product Security Summit as part of the DSCI Best Practice Meet 2023. So, as part of the TCS cybersecurity organization, I think as Samir introduced, I lead a couple of centers of excellence globally focusing I'll use this one. Better now? Okay. I can walk around there. Yeah, so I lead the Center of Excellences on two topics. One is on cryptography services, and second is OT and IoT security, right? And we're seeing, especially in the IoT side, a lot of convergence between these two service lines that I lead. So it's an interesting time as we start using crypto more in products within, especially IoT products for use cases like authentication, etc. So I called my keynote here, securing a digital future, right? Extending to what Vinayak was talking about, the applications, products, and so on becoming part of our future. It's part of our day-to-day digital lifestyle today, right? UIDI, Aadhaar is a classical example, at least in India, for everything that we do. The payment systems that we have, right? These are all huge complex products that have been built over a period of time, and they're enabling the social life. It's making our lives easier. It's improving economy for the country and so on, right? So, from standing here as an IT professional, as somebody in the software and hardware industry, right? We are looking at it as a digital future, and it's important we secure these products that form part of our digital future. Now, these products just have evolved over a period of time, right? Years ago, when software was being built, etc., we had very simple applications, right? That had maybe a simple user interface doing some basic functions. Think Notepad, for example, right? For note taking and little bit of function that's remained that way all through even today. That evolved to multi-tiered applications, web applications, and so on. So where you had the presentation layer, a web layer, you had a database, and so on. And over a period of time, those have evolved as well. The technologies have evolved, making it more complex. As mobile came, we came across mobile applications. Where are the lights? I think the presentation not clear. I think it's also my fault because I used a black background. Okay, so software applications have evolved, right, over a period of time from simple applications to web, multi-tiered application, mobile applications, and now we have things like containers, which are not only applications but also containing within them a little bit of the infrastructure in terms of operating systems and so on. And you have network devices that have evolved into virtualized infrastructure. We have virtual appliances that are being deployed and so on. Each of those you could consider as products. Right? On the hardware side, very elementary circuit boards, microcontroller-based systems, is where we started off, and that has evolved into more into embedded systems that are now part of critical infrastructure, right? For example, the programmable logic controllers, the SCADA systems that manage all of that, and so on. Many of them are proprietary, very hardware devices that have embedded firmware within them, right? And as these systems have become more interconnected, we have come to a situation where many of these connected systems impact physical world directly or indirectly, and that's what we call as cyber physical systems today. And we have an interesting panel later today on cyber physical systems and the key trends that we see Looking forward to those conversations as well. So again, here, if you look at complexity of simple IoT devices that do simple functions like detecting a temperature or detecting a pressure, and maybe controlling certain aspects like water flow controls or pressure of pipe and so on, to more complicated systems like medical systems, your connected MRI systems, for example, and so on, and then connected vehicles and cars, right? Then you have things like robots, you have automated guided vehicles, right? More and more autonomous vehicles, and then you have the most complex possibly is your satellites, your lunar rovers, orbiters, and so on, right? So those are also again autonomous systems involving a lot of embedded software, controlling certain physical systems and so on. Right, so products have evolved in terms of complexity, but what's remained is that these products need to be secured, and I will talk about how that happens. So when I was researching, I came across this on the web somewhere, right? And this first time I came across, but doing prep, I came across this. And what's happening now, the convergence of software and hardware into cyber physical systems, one of the visionaries of our time talked about this a few years ago. So if you see what it means, what's mentioned here, it's talking about the same thing, that the software is getting integrated into hardware as today's software is today's hardware and so on. Right? Any guesses who made this statement? No? Okay. Second, when did he make this statement? Any guesses? How long ago? We are in 2023 now. Sorry? 2008? No? No? 90s? Okay, somebody's getting close. This was made in 1980. Okay, and if you search on YouTube, you will get the video where it's talking about this as well. So 43 years ago, that's as old as I am now, right? Steve Jobs talked about the convergence of hardware and software, and that's happening now. So these products today are more and more connected, and therefore they're exposed to threats. They, in many cases, are part of critical national infrastructure. Like I talked about the SCADA systems and so on that control, water treatment plants, hydropower stations, nuclear power stations, and so on. They can potentially impact everyday life, as you know it. Examples of the payment systems and the other that I talked about. Of course, there are others as well. And a lot of them use insecure libraries. So, Synopsys does this annual open source security and risk analysis report, and the latest report is out now, which talks about the code bases that they have looked at. 96% of them contained open source, and 84% of those code bases had at least one vulnerabilities, and 48% had high risk vulnerabilities. So looking at almost half the products containing high risk vulnerabilities and using open source, right? And that is insecure today. And they are subject to supply chain attacks. And we have seen quite a few of them over the last few years, especially SolarWinds, and so on. So what do we need to do, right? So we need to ensure products are secure by design, right? That's a given. I think I've been talking about security by design for a long, long time now, right? We need to ensure we, incorporate adequate security controls into the product itself, right? Rather than relying on somebody to configure something or build on top of it, try to do as much as possible within the product from a security perspective. That's the extension of the security by design. you comply with regulatory requirements, especially in some of these products like medical device, etc. There are a lot of regulations today, right? Because it impacts people as well, right? So governments are coming with regulations. Make sure you capture those and comply to those, address those in your products. If you're using third party, and 96% people use open source, make sure they are from trusted sources and you're able to keep track of vulnerabilities in those code bases and address them as well. And make sure you have an ability to demonstrate security assurance to independent parties, probably do kind of certifications, right? Get the product tested regularly by the third parties and get certified for security, address the vulnerabilities and so on a regular basis, and be able to demonstrate. So the other aspect I wanted to talk about was from a people and culture perspective, right? As product security is gaining importance within the organization. It's important that there is an organization structure. There are people empowered to ensure the products that are developed are secure, right? So that could be in the form of, you could have like a CISO, you could have a chief product security officer. So he's the liaison between your development team and the security organization, ensuring that your products are developed in a secure manner, right? He's responsible for that. Under him, he could have a set of product security engineers advising the product teams on how to build security into the products. You could have something like a center of excellence, right? Focusing on product and application security, subject matter experts who guide the security engineers in terms of building security into the products. And of course, the developers are the ones who initially develop products, and we've always talked about empowering the developers, right? Training them, making sure they know how to build secure products. All of this, while you can stand up an organization for product security, it's recommended that they also work very closely with your CISO organization, right? So that the corporate security policies are also embedded into it. And there's also an interface in terms of, for example, incident response. And there's I think, interesting topic later today on product security incident response, right? So primarily, if there are zero-day vulnerabilities identified in your products, how do you respond to the market and so on, right? Through the corporate communications teams and through the CISO organizations, that collaboration is very important. And make sure, throughout the organization, there are unified tools and technologies that support, these processes and, capabilities to build secure products. Now, coming to the product lifecycle, again, I'm going to be very, not going into depth because we have another panel discussion coming up on product security lifecycle itself. But if I'll talk about some of the key points in terms of the security lifecycle. So I'll start again. The way structure is a typical SDLC requirement design phase, but of course, with agile and so on, that keeps changing. But I think for the matter of this conversation, I'm using a traditional model. So I talked about requirement gathering, regulatory, legal requirements, and so on. Understanding the product security's specifications, but it's also important that you understand the risk profile of the product you're planning to develop. Where is it going to be deployed? How is it going to be used? What are the potential threats and risks in the target model, right? So you consider that risk profile and build security requirements for the product at that point of time itself that addresses those risks. When it comes to the design phase, of course, secure by design is what we talk about. Those principles need to be applied, and it's important that there's a lot of threat modeling that is done as well, right? Look at the interfaces to the applications, to the products with external applications. Look at the possible attack surfaces. Use techniques like Stride and so on to do the threat modeling and risk assessment. That will help you identify some of the security controls you need to build into your product. There's also about identifying the right third-party or open source libraries or code that you want to also include into the system. Development is all about secure coding, enabling the developers to ensure the code is secure by design and so on. And also about if vulnerabilities are identified as part of the validation phase, make sure you're able to remediate that as well. Then you have the regular validation. Again, with the new DevOps model, it's more about embedding that earlier, shift left, and all of that. But making sure you're testing your your code, you're doing dynamic static testing, you're doing interface testing, integration testing, and so on from a security perspective as well, not only from functional perspective. So, and finally, of course, the release. So one of the topics I'll spend a little bit, 1 or 2 minutes on is software bill of material, which is now being mandated by a lot of regulations in to be as part of a product release that organizations publish software bill of materials. And I'll talk very high next on what they are. So what I'm talking about so far has been the pre-market phase, right? Before a product is actually released to the market. There's also a post-market phase, right? That's the product is already released, there's a version out there, people are using it, and there are vulnerabilities identified, reported, bug bounties, and other things like that can be established to identify those. But then also there could be vulnerabilities in your third-party components that are embedded in there. Okay. So you need to have a plan for how to respond to those vulnerability disclosures. It could be 0 days, or it could be things in other code that you embedded in there. You need to have a patch release program, right? So if you have to patch, how do you release that? Microsoft does every second Tuesday, right? And then they do emergency patches and so on. So you need to have a strategy for your products as well in the similar lines. And then, especially in products, harder products or systems that are deployed in the field, how do you patch them? Do you do over-the-air updates? For example, in vehicles and so on, we see this more often being done of secure over-the-air updates rather than somebody physically updating, which may not be feasible. And of course, you would have published SBOMs, software bill of materials, but that could change over a period of time as you release your new versions of products. So it's important you manage those as well. So cyber risk profile, right? So you understand the risk profile of the product that you're intending to develop, right? Where is it going to be used? How is it going to be used? Who are going to be users? What could possibly be the risk associated with such usage and so on, right? So it's kind of a lightweight threat modeling. Threat model goes into more details of the architecture, but this is more of a initial work you do to identify this profile, and that can help you derive some of the security requirements. I listed down some of the security principles. Not going to go through all of this, and this is of course not an exhaustive list, right? There are aspects about authentication, who has access to the product, who has access to the code base, version management, release management, and things like that. They're about data, right? How do you secure data in transit, at rest, or even in use in modern systems? Of course, secure coding principles, DevOps, DevSecOps, audit trace, log events, and so on. So I think anybody can come up with this list. It's not that difficult, right? But a couple of things I've added specifically is software bill of material, and also important to also document, right, the security capabilities, features of your product. And if somebody needs to configure a product differently, how do you do it in a secure manner? So a good documentation that helps the implementation teams for the users in terms of how to use the product securely is also important. So finally, talking about SBOM, right? So we advise our organizations and customers to set up something called SBOM service. And what it means is it talks about 4 things. One is, of course, the SBOM generation itself. For the product that's already in the market, maybe it's about developing that from scratch. But if you're building something new, make sure you document all of those SBOMs, identify all the third-party softwares, libraries, etc. Second, I talked about SBOM management, which is to make sure it is kept up to speed. up to date for any changes. Third is proactively monitor for vulnerabilities, especially when you're using third-party code base as part of your larger product, right? And make sure you're able to address those vulnerabilities and release patches, etc. And the fourth part is the risk management part of it, right? So manage the cyber risks because of these vulnerable products you may detect. What are the legal implications of this, and also using of open source and so on. So make sure you cover that aspect as well. So what this enables you to do is, you are able to monitor your products for security vulnerabilities. You can ensure, you are not violating any of the license conditions and so on. You can understand if there are any export control, import or import control requirements that you need to adhere to, especially when you're using things like crypto systems. You can also make sure you can demonstrate regulatory compliance in industries where that is required. And another important benefit we see is when there are mergers and acquisitions and so on, it's important you know what you own, what's part of your products as well. It helps with that process as well in terms of how do you deal with that. So in summary, I think you need to develop and establish a product security program. That's about security governance, having the product governance and organization and the culture built within the organization for security. Security and privacy be designed, of course. The DevSecOps shift left approach, building that as part of your development lifecycle, ensuring enablement, training, and assurance, and finally also having a mechanism to respond to vulnerability disclosures. So with that, I'll close here for the day. And I'm looking forward to further participation for all of you and the panel discussions and the talks that we are coming up on various aspects. I hope I've set the stage enough for the deep dive of all of the sessions that are going to come up. Thank you.
Okay, next, we have a panel discussion on product security core considerations. To join the panel, I invite Mr. Ravi Sogi, Director, Product Security, Privacy, DevSecOps, Philips. Next, we have Suhas Desai, Senior Vice President, Cyber Technology Head, Aegis Cybersecurity. Next, we have Philips Varugis Vayara Kunil, Global Head Applied Intelligence, Platform and Engineering, DXC Technology. Next, we have Snorlata Polineni, Product Security Center of Excellence, TCS. And to moderate the discussions, we have Vinay Godse, CEO, DSCI. Hello.
This is okay. Good challenge, yeah. This is much better for me to see them and talk, right? Thank you, Ganesh. This is a very context-setting deck and probably talking about all of those things that you need to consider for product security. And this session is exactly taking the discussion ahead. So I'll like to start with Ravi. So you had been in product security for long, and we have been talking about this for almost so many years, basically, right? So what has changed in recent past, which is bringing more focus, more attention to security of the product?
Yeah, I mean, I did not get your last bit of the sentence. You asked me like what changed in last 10 years?
Last 2 years. Maybe we have been working on this agenda for last 2 years. This
Yeah.
seems to have got a lot of attention. So
Oh, yeah. No, COVID. No, significantly. I mean, one, I'm from the health industry. Otherwise, the very adoption of the cloud that we are seeing in last 2 years, yeah, it's amazing. I mean, nobody expected, people would start adopting the cloud, yeah, the way they are adopting it, yeah. So that has changed significantly. So with that, there is this. I think you covered that in your opening remark as well. IoT, yeah, the way the whole world is moving towards IoT, yeah, that has changed the things significantly, yeah. Um, a lot of things have changed, the way people thought, or I mean, the end of the, kind of the perception was there, I have to work in a certain way, yeah, but that boundaries were broken, yeah. That has changed, and everything in a way, it got connected into a product out there, yeah. So that in turn led into significant demand on the product security and privacy, so the kind of the data, these connected devices are now generating is humongous, yeah. So they are there everywhere, yeah. So a lot of things changed, in 2 years, probably, um, whatever it took for last 20 years, the kind of the changes that happened, so last 2 years, that kind of an
Yeah, and
exponential things
pandemics
that,
certainly, and the issues that everything got so exposed, and that's why we need to focus on product security. Security of the product is definitely one. And remember the Zoom game, and there was issue with the product, and then how quickly they have to resolve it, basically, right? So every product has gone into this kind of a thing in last 2 years of time. So one is certainly the issues and problems and adoption of the product, but there's also obligations and liabilities. So anybody who like to talk about last 2 years, there are a lot of obligations and liabilities started coming on product industry, right? The product actually. So Subhash, you would like to take it, right?
Yeah. So to add on Ravi's point, last 3 years, if you are seeing from the IoT or connected devices, uh, before that everything was like say legacy systems, or if you want to check any system, or if you want to do predictive analysis for maintenances at OT systems particularly,
Yeah.
so you need to go and manually do that.
Yeah.
Now because of cloud part and connectivity for the OT platforms, IoT platforms, people are able to do that. And because of this, data has been exposed. So you imagine most of the energy sector or oil and gas systems are connected over the internet, and that is very sensitive. And because of that, data security compliances, that is one concern. And when you are connecting to the cloud platforms particularly, so people are still worried, like whether my data is really secure on the cloud. The compliances on cloud, data security, and devices, who is actually owning my devices, that is a still big concern. So from the compliances regulatory perspective, devices ownership, device management, as well as data security on the cloud environment, I would say.
Yeah.
These are the things.
So these are industry trend, but it's also started now creating challenges in some of the countries, right? For them, better security of the product became an important discussion area, especially supply chain security perspective, right? It used to be very hardware specific concerns, but it is coming to software level as well, right? And the obligations started coming in, and all of the geopolitics that we have in terms of technology, so that started putting a lot of those kind of a pressure on making the product more secure and making product more accountable for the security, basically. So the presidential directive which came recently, or some of the, even in Indian case, right? SEBI recently brought a framework which talks about product vendor has to take care of on responsible for liabilities. Telecom is also talking about it. So this external regulatory pressure also putting a lot of those kind of obligations and liabilities on a security product. So I would like to talk about it, why the demand is increasing for product security, and what are the regulatory issues are driving that.
Yeah. See, basically, this technology is evolving, right? See, most of the products that are getting built on using AI or blockchain, they have to consider about like what is like in AI, mostly or whatever the threats and vulnerabilities are very intrinsic, because the algorithms, whatever that are getting built and the technology that is being used are more actually vulnerable, and it can be developed and people can actually build a models and try to actually make it what we say like impose that data can be actually changed, because it all depends on the data. Whatever the models that are going to be built, it all depends on the data. You can poison the data so that like your models can go away. Like it is not that like oh I have built my model based on this particular data. It's not going to remain the same. You can go and poison the data, right? Like basically the technology impacts a lot when it comes to AI. When it comes to blockchain, it all depends upon like wallet management, how you're going to do it, how the key management is going to be done, right? So it all actually it has changed to the technology, and we have to actually look out for the threats and vulnerabilities that are actually going to impact that one and make it so that it can improve, learn it, and improve on that, whatever the vulnerabilities that are there, and it can work upon that.
So,
No, that's one of the very key requirement. I think we as a Philips, let's say I come from the Philips, we are significantly impacted. Let me put it that way. Yeah. So keeping away the geopolitical reasons, why these kinds of requirements that are coming up, so what has changed, now significantly that adoption is happening in terms of the cloud, IoT, SaaS services at the one end. Everybody is coming out to the business. There is no business boundaries as well. Yeah, everybody want to capture that market and everybody want to develop faster. Yeah. Now, the one of the way for anybody to develop faster is start consuming whatever is available free, in terms of the open source. Yeah, and it's unprecedented the problem. Actually, you look it from the product point of view, how deep rooted this problem is. Let's say, I mean, I embed some component from a vendor A. Yeah. So I would have my own open source component, obviously it's a chain going on. I embed something from my vendor. He would have embedded something from some other, open source component. That guy would have embedded something else. Yeah. So if you look at the entire chain of the library of the components in my product, that what I sell it to somebody else, it's a humongous amount of the open source components are there. Yeah. And it's a huge problem because what happens, commercially available, components out there, you have a vendor out there, giving you the patch information, security issue information. Yeah, the system is well set, you're paying for him, to provide you the services, that part is set out there. Here comes the biggest challenge out there. Yeah, so now government know this is a serious problem. Yeah, they want all the product company to comply and let everybody know very transparently, yeah, that what all the software components that you have. I no more can live with the obscurity. Yeah?
Yeah.
So I need to publish everything. So it's a double-edged sword. Now everybody knows, what kind of components out there, and there are tons of vulnerabilities out there. Yeah. So now to complicate it further, yeah. So these are all open source components out there, developed by a few individuals. They put it on internet to anybody to adopt it. I'll keep aside the legal, issues out there because I touch upon open source components. If at all I use it, there are certain obligation for us to, I might need to expose my own code out there. If I modify something, I need to, those are the legal issues. We keep that aside. Yeah. Now these guys go on developing the next version. Probably I am 5 version below because product development does take some time.
So you talk about very important things. So this SBOM itself would be creating some of the challenges, but management, which Ganesh also talked about, management of the SBM is very crucial and critical part. But I'd like to come to Philip, to you, right? So overall product security, as another talk about in the context of the technology, right? So one is the AI, but we always sometimes AI becomes big elephant, but there is a lot of other technology. Like most of the products are hardware products. So semiconductor technology evaluations are happening. Blockchain is coming. IoT we talked about. Wireless ecosystem changing. A lot of mobility that we are trying to practice. So in context of the emerging tech, right? So this is still very early stage of the way the products are built. But going forward, we are into age where every capability that is important for you, no matter where it is developed, be it Brazil or be it Eastern some geography, we want to use it because that is available for use to on cloud basically, right? So going forward, there's the composition product will be more and more complex going forward basically. So how do we see uh, we are preparing ourselves, product security effort is going to address some of those things?
Thank you. For me personally, all these technologies tools are becoming personal today, right? The reason is that even a Pani Puri seller today is running his business on technology, and we can call it as full stack cognitive architecture, a combination of AI to IoT to cloud computing to cyber physical systems and so on. It's all in a software defined world, right? Unfortunately, on the other side, we're living in a 0-day vulnerabilities and zero-click attacks time.
Yeah.
And knowingly or unknowingly, the software are being developed today. Every 5,000 line of code, there is a vulnerability, right? And simple as that, our mobile phone we are carrying as having at least 5,000 vulnerabilities, right? So we are moving, we are a moving target all the time by ourselves, right? Companies are adopting this AI and connected systems, not only just because of there is a need, but there is a fear of missing out, right? Some of the examples are like, there is a company called NetDragon in China who is deploying a humanoid as a CEO, right? So you're talking about a digital CEO. And Volvo has launched a car which is replacing the HR manager doing the interviews, right? So if you look at all these full stack cognitive architecture which is running on cloud, powered by AI and IoT, is really changing the way that we are all working, but bringing a lot of threats and risk. The reason why, because cyber criminals are always one step ahead of us, right? So these AI systems are more used by the cyber criminals than by the corporates and the individuals. Today, they are just using AI to do autonomous vulnerability discovery, right? Self-learning swarm bots. And cyber criminals are developing or using AI to do adaptive malwares, right? As I'm told, there are a lot of cases where AI poisoning or machine learning poisoning, ML poisoning is there, right? So manipulation is going to be extremely lever that cyber criminals are going to be using. Are we really prepared, right? That is the question. In a software-defined world, I think if somebody can control the code, they'll be able to control everything. And in that whole scenario, even our own connected devices, small gadgets, which is again running on a software, can be used to launch attacks, right? These attacks can be launched against large corporates, nuclear power stations, or even pacemakers sitting inside our own hearts. And there are so many examples of where cyber criminals and even ethical hackers were able to successfully breach some of the systems in the real world today. So my recommendation, actually, I have actually 7 commandments how to really deal with these emerging systems. Probably in the coming minutes I'll share. But I strongly believe that we need to have ethical hackers in the product development teams, because as equivalent as developing an analytical model and building an AI system, right? We need to have threat modeling in building these future systems, because cyber criminals are always 2 steps ahead of us.
Yeah, one discussion I had in this, and people have a lot of challenge to see ethical hacking as a way for security, right? So they're saying that hacking and testing is so captivating, and security profession is so known to that. And product security is not only the hacking, right? It's so many things that you need to do. You need to look at architecture, you need to look at where you manage all of these things. So I will come to Suhasyu, but I would like to come to Swarnata. Help us with this COE that you have, right? What kind of activities basically that goes in terms of running this COE? What are different things that people are asking you? Are you doing only for TCS product, or you are also serving some external parties in the product sector?
Okay. Well, as on today, we are just serving the TCS products. I'm not into the consulting, but yeah, we do have the teams where we are into the consulting part of it also. To talk about like the COE activities, like what in a day-to-day life we are doing, like see the products are coming, like I'll just try to relate it with the cybersecurity framework, like NIST cybersecurity framework, wherein we talk about like identify the 5 core functions of the cybersecurity framework, right? Like one is identify, protect, detect, respond, and recovery. These are the 5 core functions in the cybersecurity framework. We go on by that. So what is there in the identify? Like we just try to see, like you have to know about the product, what product is about, right? What it deals with, what kind of data it is dealing with, how the data is being stored, who are the users of that particular data. That has to be understood. Then if we know about the product and if we know about the technology, then we can identify the threats and the vulnerabilities that can impact it. Then when it comes to the protection, we need to know about the controls that go into actually protect these vulnerabilities or the threats, right? There we can talk about all the security principles what Ganesh was pointing out, like authentication, authorization. What is that in the confidentiality that you have to deal with, how the data is going to be protected, because anyways data is going to play a very important role in whatever the product is going to be, right? And we were talking about AI data poisoning and all, like how the data can be protected. So in the protection phase, like we talk about like what are the controls that the products that any teams or the assets that are getting built, what are the types of the controls that they're going to build in it. And then respond and the detect and respond is more from SIM and SOAR perspective, right? Okay, what sort of controls I'm like, how we are going to overcome those threats,
But
right?
Siemens Sor is largely I have enterprise SIM, right? But when it comes to product, your product going into enterprise, right? Where exactly you will it seems SOR may not be applicable in that case, basically, right?
Like from an operational perspective, we do even talk about that.
Yeah.
Like what sort of so you're monitoring the logs, because monitoring of the logs is very much important. How you're going to have the logs enabled in your product, because that plays
Means
a very important role.
how the product supports the security monitoring is important part.
Yeah. So that during the protect phase itself, like we talk about like how you're enabling your logging, so that in the respond phase of it, like how actually I can go about event, if at all, if any incident or event happens, how you can go for monitoring of that. So then even the SIM and SOAR plays a lot of role in that. Then finally the recovery part of it, like how you're going to learn from your lessons and how you're going to overcome. So we go by all these 5 core functions of it, and we discuss about the security principles, what sort of controls that are going to be there, like all such things are being discussed, and we play a very good role in that.
So sorry, Subhash. So there is the enterprise security understanding that we have, right? But like for example, this SOC and SOAR, right? But when it comes to product, so contextualizing understanding for a product security is different than an enterprise security.
Yes.
Right? So can you just help understand the distinction, right?
Yeah. So when so Ravi spoke about vulnerabilities from the open source. Then Philip spoke about new age threats. Then Swan discussed about findings coming from the vulnerability assessment.
Yeah.
But when you sit with development team and hear them for 10 minutes, once you submit your reports, the first reaction is, boss, I have 10 days to go live. I have 100 findings and you are telling me to fix in 5 days. This is real problem. And now you are telling me in last week of production and this is a must go live. This is the first problem. The second problem is like you are saying this is open source, we copied, piracy, compliance issues are there. There are high risk findings are there. Now you need to help me. I am a developer guy. I don't have security background. How and when I need to fix that, you need to sit with me and help. And in such scenarios, DevSecOps in product security helps a lot. Because see, let's do first thing as a basic hygiene part. You need to follow proper security guidelines, what Ganesh discussed. Like, so there are plenty of course snippets, sample guidelines from OAPs, and many best practices are there. We need to do that first. That is first thing. Second thing, whenever you are doing for the cloud, you need to have cloud DevSecOps part. I'll give classic example for the device part. When you are writing any code for devices, tiny operating systems you are writing, and if you are changing simple bootloader sequence, it impacts a lot. And there are a couple of examples. So last month there was one attack for the cardiac device management systems, and that was a simple feature enabled, and because of that somebody, unauthorized user, got access for entire cardiac devices and customers or patients data. That is a serious issue. And in such scenario, basic thing is like during threat modeling, they missed this that this feature was not supposed to be added there. So broadly, you need to check during your design cycle what are the possible threats, whether my code will be compliant, and we need to help development team. And that part, so it is always, if you see culture part, security team, auditor team is a different, development is different. So that equation we need to build through DevSecOps, and that will help product teams to have secure rollout in the production part, and this will minimize. I'm not saying this will prevent attacks, at least this will minimize attack vectors from all points, like say APIs, from the cloud part, or say device management perspective. I think that overall ecosystem we need to build with DevSecOps principles.
Yeah. So Ravi, I think your product going into somebody, right? Some hospital is using your product basically, right? And now they are managing their enterprise security on top of it. So what is your responsibility? Because Ganesh talked about pre-market and post-market. So once your product goes, and then in the operating cycle, product will have a lot of challenges basically. You yourself will be updating the version, because of that it will happen, and there's something which will happen in operating cycle which could create challenges basically. So there are two ways. One is you identify something, and then how you support your buyer organization basically to manage security better. And secondly, they found something, and then that comes to you. So how that works basically?
Yeah. No, post market is challenging there,
Yeah.
Vinayak. Yeah, so like any other, I mean, whatever the phone we use, so they find something, they release the patches. Yeah, so you get, I mean, many times, there are certain business challenges as well. There are organizations, these medical devices, they don't stop running. Yeah, so stopping those devices, to run and implement the patch itself is a challenge. So how you design your product itself, that that patching is very transparent. That's one way. And more importantly, how you deliver the patch also. Yeah, so we're talking about pacemakers out there. Yeah, now we are getting into a situation there humans are getting patched. Yeah, so but how you go and deliver the patch in the trusted manner, that's what that needs to be worked out. Yeah, so uh, incident response, people were talking about the incident response, that's also that needs to be taken care of. So patching is very key. Yeah, so how we go ahead and deliver those patches is extremely critical. But again, really, coming back, if one is post market, more and more we shift left, Vinayak, that's where actually, because
Yeah, but suppose, but my question is like, any vulnerability get identified, or any incident that your product found, right? This is vulnerability, right? So now do you have a mechanism to track the vulnerabilities and report it back to end consumer and otherwise them? Because I am coming to PSIRT. So what is SOC and PSIRT is different thing. What is PSIRT basically?
Yeah. I mean, we are morally otherwise also obligated to, report it back to the customer. Yeah. So there is a lot of things happens, we go and report back to the customer. Yeah. If at all there are immediate quick workarounds are there, we go and advise them on the workaround. Yeah. Meantime, we need to come back and we log those, like, any other incident, it goes back to the development team to go ahead and release patch. Yeah. So development team works on those patches, and it needs to be released. Yeah. So release also can happen in the multiple way. There are a lot many cloud enabled devices, probably it might be as transparent as, it goes and fetches that patches. That's a one mode of delivery. If you look at a lot of traditional medical devices, they are not connected, to be honest, and delivering that patch is a significant challenge, because it's a labor that is involved. I mean, typically, service engineers needs to go there and physically go ahead and deliver the patches out there. And obviously, all these devices have a certain end of life. Yeah. So and you will be surprised. I mean, as I mean, typically in the industry, how many devices past their end of life might be sitting out there. That's a set of other challenges out there. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
So Philip, let me come to you in the context of this entire product security discussion that we do, right? So So there are multiple disciplines that do come when it comes to product security, right? And that's why you need multiple type of the skill, because if it is only hard software, you will usually have application security, but help us understand the different capabilities and skill that are required to really take care of security of your product, basically.
Thank you. Before come to that, which I was talking about, the 7 commandments, which I recommend, right? I have 2-3 observations as well. Whether it is product security or general security, it is a shared responsibility, right? We cannot just give that responsibility only to the product development team to ensure that the security
but
is just
now
established, right?
good that you bought it. But now increasingly, I can quote 3-4 example. One is the presidential directive in US. Then our own power ministry came up with the requirement that they are making now product vendors more responsible and liable. Then SEBI recently came up with the framework where they are now putting responsibility of product vulnerability on the product vendor, basically. Similarly, Telecom already has that, basically. So the increasingly the user organizations are making you responsible for product vulnerabilities, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. But end of the day, I personally see that, it's a shared responsibility. The reason why I say that, because I was fortunately or unfortunately, I was being part of response to many, many very critical, unbelievable cybersecurity incidents and breaches, right? So what I found is actually many times it is not because of you don't have a major complex technology in place that attack happened, but because of some basics and fundamentals were missing, right? So even in product security, it is very, very important, the basics, fundamentals and foundations, right? That's point number 1. Point number 2, when we talk about the product, we are talking about autonomous products today, right? Whether it is a software product or an enterprise application or a physical product, right? So it's all connected. And in the future, you will see a lot of transaction will be originated, transferred, processed, and stored. And the decision itself will be happening at that autonomous products, right? This is where my 7 commandments, which I personally derived out of my derived experience as a recommendation. If I can say that, I have 7 actually, So one is obviously, which we talked about, the shift left approach, right? Which is the self-healing applications. I was talking about cyber criminals using AI in a big way, right? So why don't we adopt that self-healing applications approach, especially using analytics?
You're talking about RASP kind of thing?
Pardon?
Real-time application security platforms.
Real-time application. The applications, obviously we're talking about application risk profiling, right? So using the AI itself to understand the risk profile of the applications, and applications can do self-healing by automated vulnerability remediation, right? Or alerting the respective stakeholder that, okay, the application, the crown jewels are behaving so and so, so and so. If I am not able to correct myself, these are the controls that you need to embed on me, right? So that is one, right? So shifting left and self-healing application. The second one is that how do we really embed right from the beginning is nothing but which you talked about. Secure by design and defense in depth programs, right? So right from the architecture design, how do we embed that security? Today, it cannot be looked at a product level alone. It has to be looked at defense at the edge, because we're talking about IoT devices, even CCTV cameras to pacemakers, and even a few years back, even a sex toy was hacked, right, which is connected and smart, right? It is again a product end of the day, right? So secure by design and defense in depth. The third one is the foundational security operations to be progressed or matured to cognitive security operations. So cognitive security operations, again, intelligent defense and autonomous security. The fourth one, very, very important as far as I'm concerned, is the siloed security operations to be moved into integrated security or consolidated security operations, because that is where a lot of gaps are, which is not even known, right? Though we are having a lot of tools and technologies today, but the siloed security operations open up a lot of gaps actually. The fifth one is, obviously we talked about risk profile based security. Thank you, Ganesh, for bringing that point. The sixth one is zero trust model, right? So in the zero trust model, whether it is even in the product or even in the entire life cycle, zero trust model has to be adopted. For me, it's a mindset rather than a tool or a technology. So this is where that secure first culture right? Awareness, training, and secure first culture will be helping us to embed the security right at the beginning of the security development life cycle, even for a product. The last one, not the least one, but at least for this discussion, cyber resilience supply chain ecosystem. Because for a company today, it is not about company A versus company B, right? It is an ecosystem versus an ecosystem. In that ecosystem, you will have to really embed hundreds of products and components into your offering, your services to the market, right? Where you have to ensure that cyber resilient supply chain is also very, very important. And that is where I was talking about how do you really embed even ethical hackers into your entire life cycle to ensure that you define the threat model. And because cyber criminals are always 2 steps and 10 steps ahead of us, right? How do you really anticipate those modeling, and right from the beginning you are prepared for that rather than a reactive response and preparing for a proactive defense?
Yeah, I mean, these are very important commandments for product security. But so my question, and probably then I'll come to all the audience here. My question to all of you is like, how big is this challenge, and how much attention now is given to you? I can start with only then. So I'm seeing from the larger ecosystem perspective. So in terms of career, in terms of skill that is required basically, and can we as a India play in a role basically, right? And I'm saying that because there are a lot of product security work is happening already out of India basically, right? A lot of companies are be doing. So what role that we can play? Means you're doing for internal, but probably there's possibility to do it for the external audience as well. So how do you see? And then I'll come to audience basically. So each of you this question and then come to audience briefly.
Okay. See, it all, I think like even Phillips talk about that. Learning, like training is something like everyone should imbibe that culture, like security. Shift left is one thing like which he was talking about, like, okay, it has to be imbibed into the culture of the product development. Like, yes, I have to undergo that training. I'm like security, knowledge, it has to get into the DNA of the development team. Like, yes, security has to be there. So if any of the organization which is actually working on the products, like we have to first train the team that is going to be part of this product development. If we imbibe that culture of security, thinking about security, thinking about the threats that can actually lead to that, like whatever that you're going to do, thinking about that from a security perspective, secure by design, all this shift left and all, like if you imbibe that
so
culture.
your TCS teams are coming back to you again and again now. This amount of the work you need to do in this work is now growing day by day.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's my question is.
Yeah.
So if that is happening, means you need more engineers to work in this area, more people to work in this area. So like to come to Ravi for this. Yeah.
No, typically, it's the 3 to 5% of the effort, you look at the entire product, typically it goes out there. Yeah.
That's a good measure you're saying.
Yeah, that's one of the very good measures.
3 to 5% of the effort on security.
Yeah. And the way the security efforts gets, captured during the product life cycle itself, and that's why I was able to come out with that one. And there is the dearth of the professional. I mean, there is significant gap out there, Vinayak, and it's how we as organizations also plug that.
One like now you are documenting the development in such an extent. Now you are able to tell this 3 to 5% because the effort is now captured very well, right?
Yeah. Because that goes into developer efforts and things like that. And see, it is not that. See, earlier, traditional security to this security is a significant change out there. Mindset, even that needs to happen in the security professional is. Earlier, it was more of the compliance approach. Yeah. I mean, these are the rules, these are the policies, these are the controls, you follow it. That works to a certain extent. Beyond that, they don't care. And probably, in the hyper age of automation, we don't need people to tell those things out there. Now, how you uplift the entire that R&D and development community to ensure security is part of that. So
tell me one thing, because with you. So which are those areas that you find getting skill becomes difficult? Means in the product security, are there some areas where?
I mean, security itself will become difficult. I will tell you why.
Within the security, which are those areas which? I talked to Minati, she will say hardware security is still not much.
I don't know. Let me put it, how we makes their life actually difficult rather than making it easier, for the security, so much reliance of the tool, just pumping that data into the developers, if, you pump in 100 issue, out of it, only one issue is really they need to work, security, we as a security will never be successful, number one, and will continue to complain to the people that, rest of the organization that, that end is either not, yeah.
And this 3 to 5% will grow to certain extent.
And then at the end of the day, security is there because of the business. It's not the other way around.
Yeah.
And this is all the enabler out there. How exactly I can reduce on that time. And ensure my cybersecurity maturity of the product out there. Yeah. So that's where I think each of the organization need to carve out there. Where exactly? Thing is truly actionable thing.
I'm saying, and that's why I am asking this question, because somebody out there is security professional. He want to understand the product security and join there. So in OJ's case, right?
Yeah.
You must be also thinking about how you add or develop this team which can help your client to do the product security. So is it more impetus now giving for this? Are you getting more engineers to work with you? What kind of skill? What kind of capabilities? Like.
Yeah. So, Vinayak, one point I would like to highlight. So, when we are talking about security, there are two parts. One part is the defensive part, another is the offensive part.
Yeah.
And when we are rolling out any application or any product, at that time we are doing assessment, we are giving audit report and findings to development team. But there is a one stage earlier, which is for the security automation for the code part.
Yeah.
See, from the infrastructure side, you can have patching, you can run remediated products, which can do automated patching and remediation part. But from the code level findings, if you really see, problem relies with the code. And there is a need to have secure code development. So that synergy between source code development and secure code development, and that is a real skill. So when you are speaking with development,
this is what I wanted to understand.
Yeah.
Which are those rare skills
This
basically
is the very
that we
key
should.
skill. You see, whenever you are talking with any developer and you tell him that I want to implement strong cryptography payload in devices.
Yeah.
Then his first question will be which cryptography algorithm.
Yeah.
From that level of minor details, we need to provide to him. In the secure design, like what Philip said, secure by design. Secure by design will put any document part, but in actual implementation,
actually when it comes to actual work, that's
still
that
is the first part.
Yeah.
So we need to have secure code development. That is a prime skill. Second part is the remediation.
Yeah.
So remediating whatever 100 findings you are giving. So be it through cloud environment, be it through AI technologies, be it to cognitive, be it connected devices. If you see all the devices, and I have seen couple of examples for the tiny OSs where all, like say pacemaker, even one classic example, last year there was a very famous company like Philips, they rolled out diabetic insulin pump, remote cloud-based diabetic insulin pump, and that was manipulated. That was a publicly known responsible disclosure. But before that disclosure, that responsible hacker, he provided what will be the remediation advisory.
Yeah.
That part we need. See.
Yeah. So I'll come to Philip and then because we have some time to get audience as well. So briefly, if you can add to what kind of capabilities that you need, and then we go to audience.
I think, so you covered most of the key points actually, but I would like to respond to your first question in this, the last thing. What can we do as a team, right? I have three major, it's again basics actually. Continuous awareness and learning, very, very important, irrespective of CEO or a trainee, right? Because as Suha said, it's a huge ocean, right? So in Secure by Design, so there are 135, I personally evolved and developed a Secure by Design framework, which has 135 different dimensions. It can go on, it can increase, right? Whether it's an identity access management point of view, or data leakage prevention, or your hosting infrastructure, network security aspects, even your IoT, and so on, right? It's a pretty huge framework, but continuous awareness, continuous learning is extremely important. The second aspect is, which you and DSCI is doing in a very great extensive way, which I'm really thankful for, is continuous collaboration, right? Very important aspect. Third one, continuous defense, because there is no destination in cybersecurity. Imagination is the only one limitation where this continuous collaboration, continuous learning, continuous defense have to be really on a continuous fashion to help each other to really stay secure.
So we have some time. Any questions anybody has? Any comment or observation or your experience you want to share? We'll come to you. So yeah, ma'am.
I mean, no, that's a very good question. I mean, that's where a very agile philosophy comes. Yeah. So if you look at the product, it takes probably months and years to develop that product. So earlier the way security used to happen, at the end we used to pump in everything. Yeah, it is too late for anything and everything out there. The way it happens now is it gets integrated into the Scrum itself. Yeah. Sorry.
So the question is, those applications are already in the market, right? So what you do to make sure that there is still something that you can do so that those products doesn't really expose, right? So this is a question, but I'll take one or two more and that we can collectively answer that we cover. Yes, sir.
Commercial domain, but when he spoke about the critical infrastructure, so I want to understand how much work is being done towards, if I may say, because I come from the background of armed forces, when you talk about critical things, I can say the aircraft is a critical thing for me. In this domain, how the LRUs or the products or the components which goes into the aircraft, on that aspect, is there any work going on, if you know about it? When you talk about the codes written for the aviation or the aviation, when we talk about the sensors, the radars which are integrated in the system. So aircraft once is built up, it doesn't remain the same because the products keep on coming and getting attached to the system to enhance the capability and the functionality of the system. The motherboard, when I say the motherboard is here, the aircraft.
Yeah.
So how you define those kind of
So this is
controls?
one is a very critical application. The other is adjustment. Any other question? Yeah. Yeah, this is also a very important thing, yeah. So how do you make sure that customer also engage in requirement? But we'll take this and then we'll collectively address so that we don't go back. Yes, sir.
Yeah, one more, Vinay. Philip said shift left. That's understood. There's one more paradigm: lift and shift. What I mean is, today I also come from the military background. The battlefield is full of IoT devices. And there are scenarios when an IoT device, military IoT device, which is serving a particular entity, gets cloudified. It's put on the cloud. So, what are the additional security considerations when you are doing cloudification of IoT devices in critical domains which are there?
Yeah,
So four of
I have
you
worked
and
on
you
this
have
case.
four questions, right?
Yeah, so I'll take this part. So for the most of the IoT devices, those are porting on the cloud part. First necessity is authentication of those devices. We have seen couple of implementations where unauthorized or rogue devices has been planted in the network, and if these devices are not authorized and authenticated at the platform layer, see, because you are generating, so I'm just giving you an example. So there were authentication devices, very national critical authentication devices, more than 2 million devices, which we are doing,
Yeah,
that case.
yeah.
So we are managing 2 million plus devices, very national critical. And what has happened, somebody made similar kind of models and device, and they tried to reach out to platform. And what happened, telemetry and everything was generating. So when I see in that system, I see the entire telemetry data which is coming from that device is valid because that device OS and everything was similar to authenticated devices. But when we were adding all the registration for these devices, registering all these devices for the authentication purpose, it was getting this device is a Rogo device and I was able to filter. That is a prima facie first thing we need to do. We should not allow any unauthorized or Rogo device in critical infrastructure. That is first part. Second part, there are two operating systems on every device. One is device's own operating system and application on that device. So typically most of the critical infrastructure has these two OSs. One part, if that application get compromised, you can monitor through incident response systems and you can prevent that. But if your device firmware is
there are some technologies now
Yes.
helping you doing this basically, right?
And
So
firmware part also, that firmware security is very important. I spoke about bootloader sequence. In such military grade devices, if somebody is changing bootloader, entire sequence can go wrong, and these devices can manipulate or of no use also. If somebody is able to control that, you take example about the power systems, small remote area power systems which you are putting, and if somebody is altering that, no, those devices are useless. So these are the two basic things I would suggest that is needed. And third and very important, offline storage of these devices. Sometimes these devices will be stored in remote areas or they might go non-network area. And in such cases, if those devices are logging any critical data, if that data is storing in places, that is a risk. That is also
I
a big
think we
critical
can
thing. I see.
continue with him after this. So, but Philip, the requirement, right?
Yeah.
So that will be interesting question for you to take. But brief answer to the question. So, how do you get client also involved in the requirement phase itself?
Yeah, awareness is very, very important, right? When it is coming to secure by design, it is not just about a framework or it's not just about a list of controls, right? The most important aspect is the implementation on the ground, the action, right? Testing, continuous defense means not only continuous monitoring and detection, continuous testing as well, right? So this is where if your product is already launched in the market, still your product can be tested, right? So you can release guidelines and checklists to still do some pressure testing to check the validity. The other one, if your product is already in the development area, still your security design can be embedded. The best part is right from the beginning, right from the architecture design, right? Embedding the threat modeling use cases, whether it's from an access point of view or design point of view, architecture point of view, implementation point of view, how do you embed it right from the beginning of the design aspect?
And that's why I want to come to Salnita on this particular requirement, not requirement, but the applications are there since long and they are still there. And now we are talking about product security, right? How do you make sure that those applications which probably have not been looking at the ship left and all of these things, how do you still make sure that those applications or those products are secure? So that's the first question.
Those are already there, and how we are going to go about
Yeah.
the security of it.
Because the obligations will be still there.
Yes.
There may be some products which are designed and there's in post market, and there are obligations still there. So how do you go about addressing the requirement of security of that?
Okay. See, everything cannot be implemented because it is already there in the market. I cannot just go and change it.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah.
So probably step by step, we need to take that particular approach. Maybe just take each of the security principles step by step. Like see authentication, context. There will be certain context based to that particular product, right? So based on the context, we have to understand whether there is a possibility. There are brute force kind of a things that comes into the authentication part, and in that particular product which is already there in the market and they haven't implemented it, probably now I can actually think about it. That is a very very basic thing we can start with. So step by step, now I'm talking about authentication, then probably I talk about the next principles,
can
which
take
is
one
authorization.
baseline, one step at
One
a
step
time,
at
and
a time.
gradually,
Slowly we
yeah.
can actually make it robust. Okay, that way,
So
whichever
there's
it is
something
there
called
in the
product
market,
based security baseline improvement you can
security-based
still.
improvement.
So Ravi, I want
One point I just
Yeah,
tried.
yeah.
The product update is very, very important, right? The most of the time what happens, the awareness that there is an update to that particular product or application is available is not there.
Yeah.
Even if people are aware, people are really hesitant or lazy to really implement that update, which is most of the time missing,
And
right?
usually in critical sector,
Yeah.
that becomes a challenge because people are scared about updating their product and because of the security reason. But Ravi, because you also deal with very sensitive products and application which goes into health sector basically, and some of those applications are this question on very critical sensitive application. How do we contextualize product security discussion there?
Yeah, at the during the R&D or the
Like for example, you talk about
Yeah.
airline or
Yeah,
aircraft.
yeah. No, the very good question. See, one, I will tell you one, let's say at the high level, I can say at the process point of view, I mean, somebody question, uh, um, high level design, security is an integrated part of our design. Yeah. So we need a clear sign off during the high level design before even it gets into the low level design where components wise it gets broken down. So we really go to each and every data flow, and not even at the API level. API is still huge. Every data flow we go. Yeah. So we try to simulate what can go at the each of the data flow. I mean, you cannot actually go beyond that. Yeah. One, we go at the data level, so that's a process point of view also. At threat modeling and all, it comes to picture out there. And deep down, when it gets coded, I mean, yes, my design is secured, am I coding correctly? Yeah. There are two things would happen. One is from the static code, security. I mean, that is predominant.
One is the looking at each and every interaction, each and every port, and also make sure that you try to simulate what could go wrong. And for the very sensitive application,
Right.
those things will be very intensely required to take care of. I mean, yes, but this is not this need very intense discussion, because I can understand from where he's coming. He works with us, so I understand how difficult this to get into some defense system basically, right? So but I think this is a very interesting discussion, right? And I still need to be mindful of time, but really thank you, Ravi, thank you, Sahas, thank you, Ravi and Swarnata, for really unpeeling the different facets, and more important, the consideration that needs to go for the product security. I hope this was a useful discussion. So please join me to give a big hand to all these participants. Thank you, and over to you for the next session. Yeah.
Hello, kindly get seated so we can start the next session. Let's start. So for the next session, we have a session on incident response by Mr. Vinayak from Checkpoint. So please let's welcome Mr. Vinayak.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Yeah, I like the response. Okay. So, we have had a very engrossed panel discussion where we looked at a lot of things with respect to security, right? Cybersecurity and also product security, and how do we actually look at it. Some insightful questions came in from the learned audience as well. So somewhere I would like to start with, say, a baselining, right? You always have to baseline your posture and look at what exactly is happening, look at the data, look at the events, and then take a cautious call. Also, in terms of the product development life cycle, shift left, one of the most used word, which is very apt today, is also relevant. Most of the times what happens is there is no cross-functional teaming, which helps in terms of looking at what exactly is happening at the product development, and also looking at the vulnerabilities, the disclosures, how do you fix them, and all that stuff. So there is a wide gamut of potential in terms of how do we actually fix this, right? So in terms of this presentation, while I have tried to bring in the various aspects, the tenets of incident response services, it becomes very imperative that the teams, the developers are trained in terms of the cybersecurity, so that they can all bring in a cohesive framework where these things can be avoided, right? With that concurrence, so my name is Vinayaka and I represent Checkpoint Software Technologies. We are a cybersecurity company, and one of the most important facets that you might be surprised is that we have the lowest number of CVEs, because we represent as well as secure some of the largest mission critical systems across the globe. And if you look at the paraphernalia, so we have the lowest CVEs. So that is one feather on the cap. And how do we do it? As I said, we use a lot of products that we develop on us plus on our customers to ensure that it is a shared approach and also make it very secure, right? With all of this, I would like to start with, 4 important questions, right? I like what, like Philip said, during the panel discussion, right? 7 principles or 3 tenets or whatever, right? So I will start with this 4 questions. So the audience, like is free to participate, and I would like answers from you so that I can model the presentation accordingly. Don't worry, the presentation is 15-20 minutes, that's it, okay? So the first question, very simple thing, right? What steps your unit or your organization has, like taken to prepare for a security breach? Anybody can answer. Yep. Can you pass on the mic there, please?
Yeah, my name is Banu and I'm from SAP. So we have a very good incident response team where if there is a data breach, there is a team that's already defined, and there are predefined processes as to what has to be done to react to the incident, and whatever. And there is a paper that is written. It's called the security response plan, and they just execute the plan, and in case of data breaches, the affected parties are informed, customers are informed, so we have that in place.
Amazing, amazing. Anybody would like to add?
Thank you.
Hi, I am Akash from Bharat Petroleum. So, in addition to what ma'am has said, we have a team, as well as we are having a SIM and solve system for automating all the responses, whatever we can do via system. Along with that, we are having a set of teams which are continuously monitoring the SOC, in addition to IDS and IPS system. So that's the main thing from our side.
Okay, amazing. So anything with respect to the 0-day or other things that you have in place?
Yeah, we do have a team set of people from inside this outsourced team also. Like we are having a DCS system in OT environment. So we are having a set of people from the vendor side who are continuously working with us in case of any 0-day vulnerability is coming up. So we are having a process in place with our DCS OEMs to mitigate those challenges.
Okay, right. Thank you.
Though it is a nascent state, not I can say it's keep growing, I can say, but we do have now.
Amazing, right? So like there is a planned incident response team. You have a framework, and then you have a system of SOC analysts who will continuously monitor and then take care of any things that might happen. An amazing step. So let me go to my second question. I'll not read the question, but it's like very imperative. Anybody would like to answer? Okay, the gentleman in the last there. Oh, the question has not come in. Sorry. Okay. So like you will be lucky in case you are not exposed to any of the security breaches. So do I take the answer as a no? Okay.
It's a JV, not a direct any relationship with us, but we do have some relation with that company. It got attacked in 2019. It was sort of a ransomware attack, which they had, and though the magnitude of attack was not that severe, data was not critical, so no impact was there on the asset, but yeah. Yes, I can say yes.
Okay. See, like having, so ideally any of the company would not like, like to be breached, right? But if at all there is an opportunity that gives us a great learning in terms of how do you actually handle it, how do you prevent it, mitigate, as well as the learnings from that exercise, right? So the next question is simple. What are your security incident response plans? Why is that I'm asking all these questions? These are basics, right? But there's somewhere, like I'm trying to, like enlighten or probably, like bring those thoughts into one frame of mind so that we can look at how do we exactly, like block this. The last question is, does your company collect and analyze digital forensic data, or does your unit do this? Any answers? Okay, so you have started. So that's, like an excellent step.
Lab, forensics lab.
Okay.
For which we have just started with malware identification and automatic behavior analysis of the malware for one of the systems.
Absolutely. With AI and ML, it becomes much more easy. But what actually happens when there is an incident is that time is the essence. You will not get time to actually analyze, look at where the attack happened, how exactly, like it altered, many of the systems, and what is the processes that it affected. So when you look back with all these 4 questions, it is imperative to have a plan in place and also the steps to be taken so that there is well documentation, training, and also there has to be a continuous practice. So with that, I have an excellent quote by Stephen King, which talks about there is no harm in hoping for the best as long as you're prepared for the worst, right? So any of the organizational unit or the organization should be prepared for a cybersecurity breach and ensure that you have set systems in place, and also who are the right people who will come in and what are the steps that you need to take. For example, if there is a virus attack or if there is a malware attack, how do you isolate the system, or do you shut down the system? What exactly do you do? All of those has to be clearly documented. This we see in the paper every day, or we see in the internet every day. So there are multiple security incidents that happen, and a lot of them happen with phishing or with the product vulnerabilities or the deficiencies, whatever that we call. And then we have certain things that actually can go wrong. This is where we go a little bit into detail. So the first one is the misconfiguration with the products, right? So the product is ready, the product is deployed with a customer, but then there is a configuration error or whatever that is happening, due to which there is a gap. Second, the learned gentleman talked about this inability to patch the legacy system, be it on the medical devices, be it the OT, be it the IoT, or whatever that we have. So some of these devices are never connected to the internet. So there is no way that you can actually reach out to them and then patch them. So how do you actually look at it? The third and most important aspect, which might interest all of you, is what we call as a test system compromise, right? So what happens if you poison the test system itself so that all the results that you are getting are accurate and you think that your product is foolproof, and then you go and deploy and then all hell breaks loose, right? That is one. Next one is what we term as an endpoint protection, which is not fully deployed. For example, in a complete organization, what happens is there are 1,000 systems. If 998 systems are patched and are protected, 2 rogue systems are available, they can actually bring in that attack into all the other systems, and that can create a havoc. So how do you actually monitor this? Because your developers, your systems also can be compromised as such. Next important aspect is what we term as a zero-day vulnerability. This is becoming crazy. We have generations of ransomware attacks. We have generations of 0 days that are getting detected every day, and hackers trying to feast on them. Then comes the merger acquisition. So today, the era of unicorns, there are multiple acquisitions that keep on happening. How do you actually bring in that security semblance into the organization that you have just acquired? How do you ensure that you have the visibility with respect to both the organizations? And also, how do you actually manage all of the threat modeling, right? This is all with respect to the employees or from the outside world. But there is one significant element that we always miss: third party or vendor access. This might be direct or indirect to most of you, but third party or vendors who are having access to the systems can laterally move inside and can create havoc again. Last but not the least is what I term as the human error. This happens all the time. No matter how much trainings you do, and no matter how much enlightenment that is happening, but still there are a lot of things that a human error can cause, either because of unknown reasons or because of some grudge. So this takes the center stage there. Now let's take a step back and see, as per ISACA, what are the cybersecurity attack vectors? I'm sorry for the small font usage there, but these are different cyber attack vectors that I thought I should definitely represent here, because these are the ones that you deal it on a day-to-day basis. Hope you're all in agreement with me, right? Let's take a look at some of these, right? So for example, unpatched vulnerabilities. So this can look at almost all the threat vectors. The objective is to access any specific device, and how do you actually block it is by a patch management system. But can you manage to patch everything? It's difficult. So how do you exactly look at it? Session hijacking, brute force attack, Madam talked about brute force attack. So a lot of these things are there. Judicious use of AI and ML to be a couple of steps ahead of a hacker, and also to utilize the baseline data and have a security posture defined with respect to the development will provide you at least an emphasis or a direction in terms of how exactly is the security of your product or your organization in that context. If you look at it, These are the problem identifiers. Whenever you are seeing any of these symptoms, it is very important for you to report it or bring it to the attention of a CISO or a security team so that they can take necessary action. A step or a time lost here can definitely create havoc. Why? Is because as per what we have seen with the analysts say, like they always paint a gloomy picture. So I don't like analysts per se, but they are important as well, right? They are playing the devil's advocate. There is no end to the breaches, right? So the first code itself is, like very imperative. 30% of critical infrastructure organization will experience a security breach. So what are the products that go in there? The products that we all develop actually go in there, and these are what you call as a nation state attack. We all are seeing what is happening with respect to what happened with respect to US last week. We are seeing what Russia and Ukraine are doing on a regular basis, and then we saw a lot of these things. IBM puts the average cost of a data breach at $4.35 million. And there are compliances, and then there are coastal regulatory fines and a lot of these things. Above all, like the image of the company as well, right? And again, the last statement by Gartner there, right? CISOs are judged by their incident response, not by their ability to prevent breaches from ever occurring, right? If there is no breach happening, right, CISOs will not be called for. CISOs are necessary to prevent these kind of breaches, right? With that, an amazing slide that can actually bring in a lot of insight is the faster you hunt and contain breaches, the smaller is the financial impact. This goes with even the product development life cycle part of it, and going into shift left. There are a lot of tools available, even tools coming in from Checkpoint, where we can do DevSecOps. In the sense, whenever the code is getting developed, we can look at vulnerabilities and we can alert you as you keep on developing the code. So that is one more important aspect. But coming to this specific slide, look at the number of months and look at how many million records or how many stores got breached. In this context, if you look at it, if you can block an attack with a minimal dwell time is how long the attack is inside your organization, the lesser, okay, so the like the reduction in terms of like the breach surface. So if you look from 1 day to 60 days, right, it is a full business impact, and these are real life examples which you can actually look into the internet and have a very clear identification. So this actually helps us in terms of threat modeling as well as taking a judicious view of how exactly we should approach the incident response part of it, right? So if you are looking at it, normally there is a tabletop exercise associated with an incident response session, but due to paucity of time, so we'll not be able to do it. But I thought it is prudent that we will put in specific scenarios for an incident response life cycle as well here, right? So if you look at a network compromise or a service compromise or a computing device compromise, we all talked about the mobile devices. A lot of these mobile devices can be compromised, and it can be via the device, the network, or the application itself. It can come in from DNA of attacks. That is what we actually term it. So there are multiple incident identifiers, like a Beatware, SIEM, or a SOAR in case of an enterprise deployment, or in case you're looking at shift left, it can be a code which can actually proactively look and then block those vulnerabilities or alert the developer so that it can be taken care of. So all of this with respect to specific data types can help you in any scenarios so that you can focus on the area that you are actually looking to plug the gaps at. Any questions? Okay. So this is again a very simple set of what do you say, like context in terms of getting a proactive approach to an incident response. Okay. So the first one is the organization should be prepared. So how do you actually prepare the organization? You have a set of proactive services so that you can always look at how do you actually prepare for an incident. The second, have somebody, right, in your team or an external team to collaborate so that you can have 24/7/365 availability of industry experts so that you can respond quickly as well as effectively. So some knowledge is inbuilt, some knowledge is from an external organization who can deal and dwell with these kind of incidents on a regular basis. Because they would have looked at multiple breaches, they can bring in much more sophistication and nuance in terms of attack handling than what you normally do, because you are looking at from one point of view, they can bring in the other point of view as well. Then the best part, the panel also talked about it, the AI and ML, the proliferation and all of these things can also be used in security. For example, just taking a step back, we as Checkpoint have something called as a threat cloud, which is 85.5 billion queries, which is more than 16 times what Google normally does in a single day, right? So these kind of things can also be used, and you can have this threat feeds coming in or indicators of compromises coming in, or you can utilize some of these into your product development life cycles in whatever manner deemed sufficient. Then you can actually look at this in terms of incorporation. Last but not the least, you have a partnership so that you can have peace of mind whenever you are not looking at it, somebody else is looking at it for you. So this is very important. And when I talked about proactive approach, you might ask me what are those, right? So there are a lot of organizational units within your organization who can actually deliver this, or there are third parties who can deliver this also, right? So the first one, like my first question was, have an incident response plan, right? So for your entire unit, entire organization, any type of breaches, okay, you tailor the layout and requirements of your business environment either for you or for your customer, so that the customer would love to adopt your product, because you say that, look, this is my product, this is the way I will handle any of the incidents, this is the way I have contained. So the customer would give you more marks in terms of shortlisting you as well, right? The next one is the tabletop exercises. A lot of tabletop exercises are available with respect to incident response. This has to be regular affair in terms of a monthly, a fortnightly, or a quarterly, depending on your product release life cycles, and ensure that all the users are sufficiently aware of what to do next rather than going helter-skelter. The most important aspect is, once you have an incident response plan and a tabletop exercise, how do you actually develop a playbook? Because once you have a playbook, anybody who can go through the playbook will be very easy for them to understand and also to appreciate and react in that scenario. So these are three important services. Apart from this, there are two more which will come in, right? So the fourth one is the external attack surface mapping. This normally would be a quarterly review to provide continuous security posture, improvements. For example, if there is a specific baseline and if there is a deviation with respect to the baseline, how exactly you can look at it. And finally, the threat hunting part of it. This is the most important aspect of it, because you can proactively identify threats inside your unit, inside your code, or inside your organization. So these are some of the aspects. Now you might ask me, I gave you this 5 tenets. Now, how do they actually matter, or why do they matter? If you actually ask me, so this preparedness actually helps you in terms of your ability to contain a breach in a quicker time than being non-prepared. Second, you can also use traditional hour-based plans from an external unit so that you can keep on looking at continuous improvement, right? So when I look back, Gartner actually says, 3 must-haves for incident response, right? So first is the incident response plan building. Second is playbook, which we looked at. Third one is regular tabletop exercises, so that you are continuously aware. Then we looked at proactive incident response. Now take a look at active incident services, right? So what are active incident services? So the active incident services again have multiple tenets, but the most important of them, first one is execution of a plan. You have a plan, but you should have experts who will work side by side so that you can respond swiftly as well as effectively to any situation. The second one is the availability aspect, very simple. Third one is you will have to leverage on the resources. As I talked about, threat intelligence or the threat research teams along with the information so that you can respond effectively. These are the 3 important ones. The other 3, as I asked, the audience, is in terms of how do you actually look at blocking a ransomware. So that is very important, because ransomwares are spreading like wildfire nowadays. The next one is the forensics aspect of it, right? So you should know to understand the simplest and most complex types of malware as well as identify. So that is very important. Just doing forensics for 3 months will not do when there is an attack and the board is actually pestering you for where exactly the threat came in and how exactly did you block them, right? Last but not the least, the full breach analysis. What is the learning from that particular incident? How do we prevent that in future? And how do you actually have a proactive plan? This is what actually is very important. So we looked at proactive part of it, we looked at active part of it, which goes side by side, and then I would like to give you an active incident example where we were involved, right? So this is a global software development company, right? So this was a clear case of extortion, right? So how exactly this happened? There was a cloud-based code repository. We talked about lift and shift. We talked about shifting left and all these things. A lot of code is there in cloud. So how nobody knows how to actually secure the cloud, or developers will not think about it. It's actually like the security team which has to actually think about it. So the threat actor in this case gained access to a cloud-based code repository. He embedded simple backdoors into the code. Okay, very easy there, and there were specific notifications which the organization actually had built in with respect to code changes, but nobody saw those warnings or whatever, because normally we never look at warnings. We just push or we execute it. So what exactly the code had? The code had embedded API keys which allowed the threat actor to access that X3 bucket as well as other SaaS applications and allowing them to steal data, right? So the threat actor demanded a fee to delete the stolen data, or they would make it public, right? You know what would have happened later. But this essence is providing you with a glimpse in terms of what actually can go wrong when you ignore warnings or you don't have sufficient controls for your code in the cloud. Okay. So with that, what I would definitely say is have an incident response plan, if not from your organization, from an external party as well, where you can leverage an incident response team to help customers prepare your unit or your organization for any security incident without exhausting any of the hours, right? How do you actually do it? So it is in terms of planning, recon, external attack surface mapping, as well as plan review and feedback, along with low cost add-on hours. So all of these can actually come in handy when you face an incident or when you are about to face an incident, right? So what exactly happens? The most experienced organizations, I give you an example of a leading global software organization which got extorted, right? So they can be caught off guard. So have a walk-in kind of incident response services available, or work quickly to identify the scope of the incidents and have a comprehensive plan. That's what I would clearly say, which will help you in terms of having at least the peace of mind coming in, right? So with that, from Checkpoint side, if you can ask me, what is there available? So we have a Checkpoint research team, more than 500 plus cybersecurity researchers based out of Tel Aviv and US, looking into the threat vectors continuously. And we also have thousands of our sensors deployed across the globe. Plus, we have our OPSEC Alliance, wherein which we collect data. Then we have the managed prevention and response, where we have skilled threat hunters providing you SOC as a service, along with Checkpoint incident response team handling more than 3,000 plus incidents per year. So this is in glimpse. Don't go with whatever I say. Look at the specific requirements of your organization, what exactly you look at it, and there are multiple people who are providing you services. Evaluate the best and then have a relation with them so that you can have the best of your organization plus the best of the external party. That's what I would say. Any questions? Okay, there are no questions. I'm available. Okay.
More than 50% or 60% make in India. Do we have such a product?
See, normally incident response is offered as a service. Point number one.
As a service,
point
okay.
One.
All on-prem, can you deploy it?
It essentially would be a SIEM SOAR kind of a combination where.
No, if we already have a SOC or
Okay.
a SOAR and all
Okay.
those things,
Okay.
can you just give a component? Can it be integrated into the system? But do you have an MII software available, MII compliant software available, or always you are dependent on your overseas principals, USA or Iran? Or
See, at this point of time, MII software is not available as per the best of my knowledge. But you can look at this as a service where you are not using anything, but you're utilizing their services, which can be very cost effective for organizations.
So that service would be provided from the Indian subsidiary.
Yes, it can be provided from overseas. It can be provided from Indian subsidiary, or if it is a specific, sensitive customer, then it can be provided through a partner or a resource sitting inside the organization also.
Okay.
It can be worked out. Madam, there are multiple standards available again, and again it is with respect to specific verticals. You can look at multiple verticals as well, right? You can apply all of these standards, but again depends upon the kind of organization that you are in or the vertical that you are in, and then we can look at multiple standards. To start with, I would definitely say that look at the vulnerability disclosures, look at how secure is your code, look at your virtual patching, right? Like, normally what happens is you cannot patch each and every system, right? Look at virtual patching, that would give you a head start. Then look at having an incident response plan. Then look at standards. So 1, 2, 3 in that context. Definitely, madam. So if you look at what is happening today, right, like the threat database is vast. So I'll differ a little bit in terms of, setting the context there, right? So what happens is there are known threat vectors. For known threat vectors, you can easily, look at blocking them because there is a signature. But, with multiple changes, evasive malwares with 0-day where there is no signatures, where you'll have to look at the behavior, then it becomes a lot difficult in terms of analyzing them and also blocking them. So that is where the AI and ML things come in, right? So just to give you an example, how do you block a ransomware? There is no easy way to look at blocking a ransomware. The first approach that I can take is content disarm and reconstruction. So whatever attachment is coming into my organization, I will strip the macros and executables, give a PDF file to the user. If the user can do with it, then there is no harm. But most of the times a developer would actually need an executable. So that has to go into a sandbox where it has to get emulated and then, given back to the user. That takes a long time, right? So, and all of these things, if you look at it, there are thousands and thousands of events happening every day. So when we look at integrating with an AI and ML approach, so what happens is there will be 60 plus different engines which will be looking into each of this particular data, looking whether this is a malicious threat or this is benign, and then it can give a accurate verdict. And these are modeled amongst multiple millions and billions of these incidents, so that they can quickly come back with a response. So that is what we normally do. So one is the indicator of compromise. Second is what exactly you do in that situation, and how do you look at whether that is an actual threat or not. Yeah.
Data breach? Is there any specific plan we required for a data breach separately?
See, most of the incident response plans are not vendor specific or not attack specific, right? So when an organization is discovered that they are under attack and they need help, then you can go for incident response. It is not attack specific. So for example, if it is a DDoS, then definitely the incident response analyst can come in and can help you in terms of to block that DDoS attack as well. Sorry. Thank you very much.
For the next segment on product lifecycle security, architectural design, development, testing and operations, we have with us Mr. Karthik Shivkumar, Principal Engineer at Cisco, followed by Amit Gadre, Information Security Consultant, and Ashok Kumar Ganeshan, Security Architect at Tata Consultancy Services, who will be deliberating the presentation on the theme at hand.
Good afternoon. My name is Karthik. I'm a principal engineer at Cisco Systems in the Security Business Group. So I'm here to talk about product lifecycle security. This talk is actually split between three of us. So I'm from Cisco, Ashok and Amit from TCS will also do the second part of this. So let's go. So there's going to be 4 parts. We'll do the introduction and architecture and design. Introduction of product security as a whole. What do you do in the architecture and design phase? What do you do in the development test phase? And what do you do in the release and operate phase? Right? So again, the first part, introduction and the architecture and design is what I'll cover currently. So again, I'm Karthik. This is, I have a co-author, Matthew. He is not here at this point. Matthew Byword is my co-author in building this, in building the slides, building the product security part of it, all of it. So So first an introduction. And a lot of this is not going to be new. I mean, we've all been thinking about it. We've had, Ganesh talk about it in the keynote today. We've had, previous presenter talk about it, and in the panel discussions. So none of this stuff should be new, but this is more of reinforcement of what are we trying to do with product security? What are the different phases of product security, different life cycles that we follow as we go along in the whole product that we're building, and what should we be doing there? And I'm also going to give you some examples of why we should be doing product security in terms of failures, right? And we'll see what those failures are, what they resulted in, and maybe that reinforces the idea of why we must do product security and what are the things that we can do. So in the life cycle itself, there's all these different stages that we know about. You think about a product first, right? And then you start saying, I'm going to try and build this, right? And then when you're going to start architecting, I need this, I need a database, I need some web interface, and I'm going to put all of these things together. They're going to talk with these APIs, and these messages are going to go through, and so on. So you put all of these, the thoughts down, you start architecting them, you start designing all of these, and then you start coding, testing, and then you go back and say, oh, I missed something, I'm going to go back and repeat this, and that's the cycle that we normally go through as we build products. And if your product has lasted 20 years, you've probably even forgotten why you built something in the very first place, and you forgot where the code is, and you no longer know anybody in the company who understands that code anymore, right? And so on. So this is a cycle that we're all constantly going through, right? So when you go through these kinds of cycles, and if you really have a product that lasts for many years and decades, like in the case of my company's product, for instance, they lasted decades, right? So there are certain things that we have to follow in terms of building a secure product, right? So the very first thing that we've started to do is, as you start building your architecture and design, you're going to start building threat modeling, and we'll do a little bit more in detail, right? We're going to start looking at the threat modeling. You're going to start analyzing the gaps, right? You're going to start talking about this API is sending these kinds of data. Right? Is the receiver ready for that? What if I, fudge the data a little bit? What's going to happen on the receiving side, and so on? So you're going to start thinking about all of these. Third-party compliance. We're all using third-party software. If you have a lot of developers in your team, and if you go ask them, they're probably using a lot of third-party software that you did not know about, right? They're probably just importing something from Python library or NPM or somewhere, and just simply calling pip import this and just running it. And none of us know about it. Right? So that's a very big problem that we face. So we need a way to keep track of the third-party software that we're using. And by third-party, I'm not just talking about open source. It could be non-open source. You probably bought it from another vendor that you're integrating in. Any of those kinds of third-party software, right? You have to identify and address the security threats. Address does not necessarily mean that you fix the threat. And we'll see what that could possibly mean. Right? But the very first step is you at least must know all the security threats that are there. Do you know them? Right? That's the very first step. Preventing it. So when you start, coding, you need to start thinking about how do you prevent the security threats, right? And the key thing, I think we had a conversation as part of the panel. Somebody said we should involve the customer in the security and talk about security in the requirements part of it, which is something that we miss a lot actually. So bring the customer in and say, do you really need that feature? Because if I implement that feature, and if you try to install this and operate this, you have a big hole there. You're possibly going to create a threat vector there. Somebody's going to come and attack it. Do you really think you need that? Can we do this in some other way? Right? That's a conversation that we normally not have. Customer says, I want this. Okay, I'm going to build that. Right? And maybe that's not the right thing to do. Right? That's something that's a conversation that we should all be having. So I want to jump a little bit into examples, and some really, really big examples. Right? The very first one is Heartbleed. How many of you know Heartbleed? This is OpenSSL, the most important cryptography software on this planet at this point. Right? It's been around for so long. Practically everybody uses it, and it had this massive bounce check problem in it that nobody knew about. And we always think a product of that nature, somebody must be doing proper code review. Right? And the previous speaker also said this, you get notifications when you get a code commit done. The whole team gets notifications when somebody commits code. How many people actually go read it? I have a separate filter for code commits. They just go somewhere into a different box, right? And I hardly ever review them. But that happens a lot. So that's heartbleed. The problem is very simple, right? The requirements clearly say, the RFC clearly says that if your message is too big, it must be discarded. That's not what happened though. So typically this is what should have happened in the heartbeat is if you send, respond with some success and you send a length, it's supposed to respond that way to you. But if you send it and say, give me success, but give me 64,000 bytes of buffer, it's just simply going to read whatever is in memory, 64,000 bytes of that and give it back to you. And that could be private keys, passwords, user IDs, anything. And we're talking about a cryptography software making a mistake like this, right? Again, well-reviewed, right? Very important software that had a problem like this, right? So this is the kind of thing that you have to be constantly looking out for, right? The second kind of problem is something that happens, and probably many of us don't even realize it happens, is the time of check to time of use problem, right? Let me give you an example. So this is just the march of time, right? At some point in time, you're going to do a verification. In this case, what I'm saying is you're going to verify for permissions. I have a file I'm going to read, right? And you're going to verify that the user that is asking you to read the file has the permissions to read the file or write the file or whatever access that you want to provide to that file. I verify that they have the permissions that they need. Then I go and read the file. But there is this big gap in between the time I verified the file, I verified that they have access to the file, and to the point where they actually access the file, right? And in that time, I can have somebody come in and replace the file. This is a very common thing. It's a little bit difficult to attack depending on the timeline, but happens a lot as well. If you see the list of vulnerabilities that have shown up across the years, right? Across the years, you can go find a list of vulnerabilities that come around with this. Again, not something that you would normally think about. A lot of us don't understand how kernels work. For instance, if I just read the system call, maybe it's doing the right thing, maybe it's not, right? And we don't really understand that. We just say, I called the system call, right? And it should have done this. It probably doesn't. Right? And many of us don't go to that level of detail. It's the same thing could apply with, especially with third-party software that you're using, where you give them a file that they're going to do something with, and they probably don't do the right thing, right? They're probably verifying access at some point. Again, would likely to happen with API keys, for instance, right? If you were handed an API key, you took the API key, you did the validation of the API key at some point, right? And then set a value somewhere saying, I verified it, sent a response back, and half an hour later they use the key. Did you revalidate it? Probably not, right? You just looked at it and said, I validated it, and then just gave them some data back, right? That's a more common thing. I talked about it in terms of system. I said access and read, and you're probably thinking I'm not running any of this Linuxy stuff, but it applies to web access as well, right? In web access also, you're doing very similar things. The point at which you do the check to the point at which you actually use the data that you are checking, it's likely to be a very long time. I mean, long does not have to be minutes, right? In hacker terms, if I were running a script that is going to run through this, it doesn't have to be minutes, it could just be seconds. Some script is just going to pound you constantly, making sure that there's a small gap in there. That's long, few seconds of time. I want to touch just a little bit on the whole use of open source stuff. I think it's very good, right? I think it's very good that we're all using open source software and we're building based on that. But I think we're also not understanding the impact of the open source software that we're using, not just from the vulnerabilities that legitimate softwares have, but also from the fact that there's a lot of software that is just not legitimate at all, right? And you can go read all the news about it. They look or they have the same name as a legitimate software does, and your developer is probably thinking, hey, it looks the same, right? I did I went and did a Google search and it said, use this cool little software. There's just this one little number after it. Maybe somebody just forgot, right? And let me just pull that package and use it. But that's not the actual legitimate software that was supposed to be used, right? That's one problem. The second problem is, I've seen this a lot, is you are taking a package and you're using it. What are the latest version of the packages that you're picking that and using it in your build systems, at runtime, all of these, right? And the thing is, that software could have changed, right? You probably validated a version of the software. At some point in time, you validated version 3.5 of the software, and then you used it. But instead of picking version 3.5 of the software at the time that you want to use it, you're just saying, get me the latest version of the software and I'm going to use it at build time or at runtime, right? That could be something else completely, unvalidated. Right? So these are all the common problems that you start to see, and it's not just Python. It's not just it's across the board, right? It's not just about vulnerabilities in legitimate software. There's like just lots and lots of illegitimate software that's just there in the software stores. So just wanted to touch on that a little bit. But if you see this, if you go through the whole cycle of product development, you're going to see problems across the board. Right? You're going to see problems in every stage, and you're going to have to build lots and lots of tools or use lots and lots of tools. So what you really need is defense in depth, right? But we're all trying to just lock the same door multiple ways. We're not locking every door. Okay, find the same door and how big of a lock can I put it? Let me put, how many locks that I want on the same door, right? But that's not defense in depth. Defense in depth is actually trying to figure out every point, every stage, and log every one of them, or like get monitoring and reporting and logging across the whole system. This is particularly true if you start building cloud-based software. Any SaaS software that you're building, they're running all the time. So it's not just that you're shipping software to your customers, but also that you're running your own software, right? You're building it you're running it in the cloud. The kind of monitoring that you need to do is across the board, right? Everything that you're doing, you must know what's happening. Right? If your cloud software suddenly uses a slightly more higher CPU than you normally expect, you have to figure it out. You have to know it's using 10% more CPU. Maybe somebody just installed a crypto jacker on it or something, crypto mining software on it or something, right? And you just didn't know about it. That happens a lot, by the way. So this is what actual defense in depth looks like. I'm not going to read, right? But there's a lot of stuff that you need to basically bring in for doing actual defense in depth, right? It's across the board. If you see, there's the perimeter part of it, the whole network security part of it, right? Any traffic that's coming in, you have to figure out, how the traffic is coming in, where is it coming in from, what does it contain? There's so much involved in the whole process. There's a lot of the monitoring and response. There's a lot of the policy part. And we always think that software development is about some tool here. I'm going to modify some code there. Is it compiling? Is it running? The policy part is usually dropped off because engineers don't really do very well at policy. Right? But the policy part, especially when you start building SaaS software, is going to be very important. The whole access management part is going to be really, really critical. Are you running single sign-on, right? Is your single sign-on provider, where is he connecting to? All kinds of stuff that come in that are not actually product development. They're not coding, right? It's the rules that you set up that also matter. And we tend to ignore those rules completely, right? And we just focused on how many bugs do you have in your code. There's no bugs in the code, right? But you just let somebody come in through the legitimate path. You let somebody come in who was not supposed to come in. There's no bug there. It's how you deployed it. It's how you set up the policy that caused the problem. Right? But there is a challenge to defense in depth. Sometimes it just becomes expense in depth. You're just buying so many tools, right? So many different parts of this and trying to put them all together. And your dashboard looks like just something you cannot understand anymore. Right? And you're thinking, what is it I'm supposed to do at this point? What is the most important thing I need to focus on? We have no way to figure it out. That's a challenge that I think we all must try to solve, is once you start looking at this across the board and you start having so many different tools that all plug into some software here and you build this nice little dashboard, your engineers are looking at going, I have no idea what to do anymore. Right? I'm just going to stop developing, right? And you tell me which line of code I'm going to fix. That also happens a lot nowadays when you start throwing metrics at them, right? You have, let's say you have one bug every 2,000 lines of code. How do I know? What am I supposed to do now? Should I write only 1,999 lines and switch to another program? Right? It doesn't work that way, right? So that's the kind of stuff that we're throwing at engineers today. Is we're collecting. Yes, we need defense in depth, but at the same time, the challenges of defense in depth also needs to be understood, and we need to deal with that, which sometimes gets lost. Okay. I just want to talk a little bit about the architect phase of it, the architect and design part of it. The normal thing that we always say is, threat modeling, right? And there's this part of this is the kind of a loop of threat modeling, right? You have to characterize the system, right, that you're trying to build. You identify the attack vectors, you identify the risks, then you understand and mitigate. Again, mitigate does not necessarily mean fix the problem. Mitigate also could mean, reduce the attack vector, find some way to, make sure that nobody can, come and attack that specific problem that you're having. That's a mitigation as well, right? But this is a loop that constantly happens. You get a lot of input into this. You get like, whatever API specs that you have a code flow diagram, you probably have, something that you're using to do static analysis, all kinds of stuff that you build in would all feed into your threat modeling. And then you keep doing this loop constantly, right? And you have to do this loop constantly. You have a new product, you have to do it. If you make an architecture change, you have to do it. You found a bug, you have to do threat modeling, right? Because your bug is probably introducing, you fix the bug, but in return, you're introducing some other threat vector, right? So every change that you make, you're going to figure out, is this, am I creating some other new threat there, right? I think something something you have to deal with. And of course, incident response, right? If you had an attack, if you had a breach, you need to go back and say, how did this happen? Go back and figure out, what is the thing that we missed? We have this whole threat model here and somebody still attacked us. What did we miss? Risk modeling, there's lots and lots of different things that you can do, or lots of different models that you can follow. I'm just going to list here one by OWASP, right? Which is the DREAD model. So damage, how bad would the attack be, right? How easy is it to reproduce? Okay. How, if it were to get exploited, right? What would it take to launch the attack, right? Exploitability. Who are the affected users and how many people are going to be affected by this attack? And discoverability. How easy is it for somebody to discover this threat and attack it? So this is a model from OWASP. Right? Again, there are lots of different models with different organizations. Pick your poison, right? But this is one of them. Right? So this is a risk modeling that you can typically do when you're doing in the architecture and design phase. Risk treatment. So I said mitigate. Again, what does mitigate mean? So you can reduce the risk, right? You can build controls around it. You can say, you're only allowing somebody with admin access to do something. So you can build all those kinds of controls. You can transfer it by saying that, normally I do something in this area which is directly accessible by users, but maybe that should go off into a separate process somewhere, right? And that way the user does not have direct access to whatever this functionality is that has a higher possibility of risk, right? Move the risk to something that's more sandboxed somewhere else, right? You can transfer it. You can avoid the risk, just turn off the feature, right? You built a feature and then you realize there's a lot of problems that are coming out of it. Maybe just turn it off, right? Maybe it's not worth the effort, right, of building the feature. So, and the last is accept. Yes, there is a problem, right? But you know what? I'm just going to take it. Because if it gets hit, the probability of it getting hit is like 0.001%, and the impact is going to be, very, very small. Maybe I'll just accept the risk for now or forever. I don't know, right? I think it really depends on what that risk is and what kind of an impact it is. And that again goes back to your threat model, right? You need to figure out who's going to get impacted, how is it going to get exploited, what is the impact going to be, all of those things, put all of them together and you say, it's fine, I'll take it. That's the risk I accept. That's all I had from the architect and design phase. My co-speakers will pick up the other parts. Any questions on the introduction, why we need to do it, how do we need to do it, defense in depth, architecture and design, very happy to. That depends on the model that you've built, right? It really depends on the code. I can't say anything. It really depends on if you were to write a software to do something. Let's say you write a software to do some bank transactions. Maybe there's no acceptable risk at all. No risk is acceptable, right? If you build something that's completely internal to your organization, let's say it's tracking, some metric in your organization, something, no external access to it at all. I don't care. I'll accept any risk there is, right? It really depends on the software. Yeah. So go back to the DREAD model, right? Or some model, whatever the risk model is that you're picking, right? Or if you pick the DREAD model from OWASP, right? Then go through that model and say who's going to be impacted? How many people are going to be impacted? What's the cost of this impact, right? Is there a branding, reputation problem? Is it going to be just money? Is it going to be actually customers losing data? You have to build that and say, okay, that's fine. It's not a problem. Yes, they hate it. I hate it. I'm a developer, right? Yeah. Yeah, so you have to. So these are all the things that I think, as an organization, we find it very difficult, right? That's why I'm saying that's where the challenges of defense in depth. I would absolutely love every one of these things to be sandboxed. The web environment, or this, the database, everything is fully encrypted and sandboxed, and my performance will be down the drain, right? But I don't want that, right? So we want very good security and we want very good performance, and they don't go together, right? They're crossroads each other. So that's really the thing that we need to think about and say, okay, that's why I'm saying we need to accept this risk, or we need to say this risk has to go somewhere else, because I want that performance. The performance is very important to me. Otherwise, I have no product at all. I have no market, right? If that's the case, then what is the risk that you're willing to accept? It's very difficult. I have no solution. I can't provide a solution. It really depends on the product you're building, the market, the security, everything. Yeah. Anything else? Okay, I'll hand off to Amit. Thank you.
So thanks, Karthik. So my name is Amit. Good afternoon, all. And so let's move to the next phases. So Karthik covered architecture and design. Now let's cover development and testing. Okay. So when in development, so as we have seen, right, embedding security is important in all the phases of the development lifecycle, and the more we shift to the left, it's better. So development team also in the development phase also, we need to make sure that we are taking security, we are embedding security. So this is a general cycle which happens during the development. Some of the activities could be in parallel. So first important point is, even before starting the development, it becomes necessary to conduct security trainings for the development team. Okay, so there are many good resources for that. Like OWASP basically has a very good resource. So we have OWASP proactive controls. We have secure development checklists, which the development team along with security team can develop based on the language and technology they are using. Then training can be in various forms to make it more interesting. So there could be hackathons, gamified training, on-demand training, along with the traditional training. Then when development team starts the development, we need to make sure that the secure coding practices are in place, right? So there are many things we need to take care of. For example, how we can secure the secrets. So secrets or keys must not be hard coded within the code. Ideally, there should be key vaults that should be used. Then there are several plugins which come for various development environments. So if we integrate those plugins help development team to identify and fix the code, fix the vulnerabilities while the development is in progress. And there are other resources like OWASP cheat sheet, which is a very comprehensive resource which covers all the types of vulnerabilities, and it gives very good guidance about the vulnerability and how to fix it. how to mitigate those. And again, there are several resources by NIST as well. Now, next phase is reviewing the code. So there are two ways generally which are adopted. One is the automated way. So their development team could utilize the automated scanners, which would basically run in the sandbox environments. And whenever development team checks in the code, that scanner will get initiated and it will do the scan and report the vulnerability. So development team can fix those at the earliest. And the second part is manual code reviews. So as we all know that scanners are not perfect. There are false positives as well. They miss some vulnerability. So manual code review also becomes important. And then the unit testing. So generally development teams do unit testing for functional things, but it should be done for security as well. So for example, nowadays we all know that applications are API based. So development teams generally works on a specific API, so they can focus those APIs and do the testing. And obviously manual testing will be there, right? So these are the steps which generally are carried in the development phase. And there is one more point we have discussed regarding the third party vulnerabilities, right? And the importance of SBOM. So it becomes necessary to make sure that whatever third party vulnerabilities, third party libraries are being used, they are analyzed thoroughly before using them. Then the next part is testing. So there are many ways an application need to be tested. So we have listed this some of the very common ways to test it. So static application security testing. So as name suggests, this is the testing of the static code when the application is not running. So generally scanners scan the code, package managers, and they basically come up with the vulnerabilities. These scanners, most of them basically scan for the OS top 10 and SANS 25 vulnerabilities. There are some open source tools, very well known scanners, which can be used. Obviously, there are commercial scanners as well. Then there are various cheat sheets that help in fixing the vulnerabilities. Right. Then the other part is dynamic application security testing, that is DAST. So DAST is when the application is actually in running state. So there are several tools. So the typical vulnerabilities would be issues with the certificates, issues with the ciphers being used, DDoS attacks, right? Then the third part is software composition analysis. So software composition analysis is basically the analysis of the third-party libraries which are being used, right? So generally tools are good, scanners are good in reporting them. They basically analyze the code and identify the third-party libraries, and then they refer to various vulnerability databases and try to identify the related vulnerabilities. So again, SBOM plays an important role in this. Then the container image scan. So nowadays we know that many of the applications are containerized. Hence, it becomes important to scan the images, right? So there are again, OWASP has a good resource for specific to the common Docker vulnerabilities, and it also has a Docker security checklist to cheat sheet to which helps basically which helps developers in configuring these images, right? And there are some open source tools like Docker Bench, Trivy, which helps in identifying these vulnerabilities along with the commercial tools. Then the tech stack scan. So apart from the third-party libraries, we also use various technologies, some commercial, some open source, right? So it becomes important to scan those technologies as well to make sure that we are identifying the vulnerabilities. So again, the process for tech stack scan and SCI is somewhat similar. There are some good tools by OWASP like dependency check, dependency track, which we can use for tracking these vulnerabilities, and obviously vulnerability databases are handy. And the next part is penetration testing, right? So penetration testing is again a mix of automated tools and manual. The manual part is also very important. So penetration testing, again, there are various methodologies, but a baseline could be the penetration testing execution standard, which is being followed, and a bunch of OWASP frameworks for testing the applications. Again, penetration testing also done is in various ways. So there could be in-house teams who do the penetration testing of their own applications. There could be third-party, vendors who should be appointed, because nowadays many customers ask for third-party PT reports. And again, we can have bug bounty programs within the organization, or there are services, third-party services, which provide bug bounty programs. Then there are certain frameworks like MITRE ATT&CK framework, which is a very good framework in understanding how attackers use, which methods attackers use to attack the applications. And there are some very well-known tools like Kali, Metasploit, Zap, SQL Map to conduct these, penetration testing along with the manual testing. So this is basically overall how security is ensured, and a couple of points. So all these phases, when these phases are carried out, there will be vulnerabilities reported. So it is then responsibility of the security team to go through the reports, analyze the vulnerabilities, classify them, which are the false positives, which are true positives, and then guide the development teams on the mitigations. And one more point is that almost except manual penetration testing, all the other phases can be integrated in the CI/CD pipeline, right? So that automation part comes in, and it also helps in the faster, analysis and fixes. So lower turnaround time, basically. Yeah. So this is what the secure development and testing, the overview of it. If there are any questions, please ask. If not, my colleague Ashok will cover the next phases, deployment and operations. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Amit. So we are in this product lifecycle security, architecture, design, development, test has been done. So this is the next session is all about the rubber meets the road, because this is now where we are taking the product to the customer's hand. So two important aspects that we are looking into it. How am I going to prepare my environment for deployment, and how am I going to continuously monitor it or keep the environment in shape? So when it comes to deployment, there are a couple of activities that we need to really focus on. Items like, first thing, I need to have a complete inventory of my assets.
the inventory can go as depth as possible in terms of the information, and it has to be very much linked, like what hardware, what software, what is the relationship, because this becomes a very important activity in terms of doing a couple of activities in the next phases. And there are models available where this can be automated. Vulnerability management, secure configuration is another important aspect that you need to prepare the environment. So far, we have talked about vulnerability management. That was on the application side. So the product team which is building the application will be doing the vulnerability test assessment and tests on the application. But then the application has to be deployed on the production. So the production environment has to be assessed, and it is very important. And in many of the cases, that is why the application development team also would not have this viewpoint that while my software is in the ecosystem, so that ecosystem has to be more safe. So there are various, so the assessment has to happen across the entire infrastructure, workload machines, network devices. It has to happen across all the infrastructure component, and secure configuration comes into picture. So the entire system has to be configured more securely. In fact, I've seen a comment. So when it goes to production, I would want it to do something, and my development team does not know about it. That's true. That is precisely the case. The deployment or the development team will not know about it, and this is the phase where we need to bring in right expertise who understand what kind of a software configuration that they have to do, and accordingly the configuration has to be done. The network management plays a very important role here. Right from the perimeter devices has to be managed or configured properly. The network traffic management has to be established. Monitoring of those network traffic, network log management has to be is a very important aspect. And very importantly, apart from the perimeter devices, within the infrastructure, there will be various network segments, and the path between these network segments also has to be very much established. And the most important aspect here is that the data protection comes into picture. So this is where the production data is getting hosted. So there should be a very clear-cut mechanism should be established in terms of who has got access to what data, and data should be safe in all three dimensions: in rest, in transit, and in use. It is very important. And in fact, this is the phase where the data backup and recovery also will come into picture. So we need to follow a right model as per the application's risk profiling, selecting a right data backup and recovery strategy, so that this will be a very important activity, and will be used in a situation where there's a threat that is happening. And finally, most important thing, the access control management. So all these activities will be done by the administrator. A fine-grained roles and responsibilities should be defined in the system. While we define this on the paper, the system should be enabled to have this control in place, and these controls should be integrated with the core central system of the enterprises. So provisioning of access is well managed. Both the access provisioning has to be audited, logged and audited, and the same way the access control activities, the administration activities will also be properly logged and then monitored. And the very important thing that we need to look here is, like, we'll be doing a lot of these activities as a first-time activity, but we have to understand that this is a continuous activity. And many of the cases where failures would happen is that if you don't do this automated manner. So there should be a proper automated model that should be established, where many of the cases this automated model will help do this activity in a continuous fashion, and B would free the humans from a mundane task, and then the administration team can focus on tasks which requires the human intelligence. So this is the phase where the deployment will happen. And the next phase, okay, deployment has been done, application has been deployed, it is used by customers. So what kind of activities that I'll do during the operations side of it? So very important aspect here, as I was telling, so the product development is never about developing the product and giving it to the customer's hand. Till the product is in its life cycle, the security of the product has to be looked into it, and that becomes the product team's responsibility. I think many of the speakers were talking about it in the previous sessions also. So key areas that we could focus on: the posture management. In fact, one of the speakers was talking about don't look at silos. That is precisely where the posture management will come into picture. Look at the security posture management as a whole for the entire environment, infra, including all the components. So there's, and very important thing, I think the keynote address took a very important step. There is no difference between hardware and software. hardwares are replacing software, softwares are replacing hardware. And in the cloud, very importantly, everything is a configuration driven thing. And one mistake in the configuration is where the data leaks is happening. And that is precisely where many of the cases we would have seen that. And that is where the posture management softwares will help us to manage, look at your policies on the left hand side. And against that policy, it will look at what is the configuration that you have been done and whether the configuration is intact. In fact, those posture management softwares are has evolved in a manner where it could take inputs dynamically in terms of understanding what is the industry standard and where there are threats, and then accordingly could even come up with the recommendations, and auto remediations is also there. So that's the advanced stage that is there, and it is very important that we define the policies taking this posture management softwares in help. The threat detection is another area. In a way, it is more like a day in, day out job of any security team or the operations team. Very importantly, so here also there are a variety of threats, and it is very important to understand the kind of threats that our application will go through. That is where the risk profiling would help us. And according to the threat, there are softwares that we need to look into it, because from malware to ransomware to DDoS, the threats would be varying. So there's a variety of tool sets that is available, and it is very important that we use the right set of tool sets, and very importantly, logging for purpose, where we need to understand what kind of data we are logging and how we are using it. That is precisely the activity that the team has to do it in day in, day out. So that when the threat emerges, we'll understand what data to look into it, what kind of a correlation to do. It's not the case where during the incident, we are going to struggle and find out what is there and how it is there, because that's not the, because that's we will be in a state of panic. In the operation team will be in the state of panic situation. So there's hardly a time for us to get into it. So the logging for purpose, I would say, is a very important thing that the operations team have to look into it. So they have to play those tabletop exercise and have to look into it, like how data is available and what kind of data I will be able to unearth it. And the advanced side of it is threat hunting, where we could go ahead and then it starts with a method saying that the intruder is already there in the system, and then I would then figure it out how to find it out. These are advanced practice. It needs a significant skill set and time, and most importantly budget to do it, because in many of the cases you will come up with a result where you don't find anything. One way it is good, but the other way it should not be looked at as saying that so we don't find anything and hence we should not do this proactive. Maybe this also assures the model saying that we are not finding anything, so things are in place. Incident response, I think the previous speaker has covered it in depth. The important aspect of incident response, the preparation stage, is what you will be doing all along. So that during the time of incident, the activities that you will be doing would be helpful for you, because you are well prepared to handle this incident. And finally, touching upon the last topic here, this is just threat intelligence. Once again, this is a very advanced area which would be done by, I would say, the organizations which has got access to a whole lot of data. I think it is very important for the enterprises to partner with those organizations, which will be able to give us right insights. And according to our enterprise security policy, integrate with those systems and pass on some of the security that is happening in our organizations to the threat intelligence system. So the system could guide us in terms of what kind of current threats that is there in the system, and then we'll be able to guide our enterprises accordingly. So in nutshell, I think we have come to the conclusion of this segment. So architecture, design, develop, test, deployment, and operations. So all put together is a very important aspect in the product lifecycle. And recently I was reading a book where the author has pointed out a very important statement. Every single error finding or every single incident response, be it your fishbone exercise or 5-eye exercise, it will stop at a time when it will find that a person is responsible for that issue. So they'll say the person is responsible for the issue, and now I will go and replace the person. The point that many of the people are not understanding is like the person is doing it because the systems and processes are in place. So it is very, very important that we educate the team who is doing it, because at the end of the day, everything is activity involved by humans, us, in every single phase of it. So educating the people, bringing in the culture, and then giving out the right budgets. All these things are very important to have this in place and make the product development lifecycle a success. Thank you. Any questions? Yeah. So two things as a product development team, I'm responsible for it. For the product that I've developed, the product's patches, security patches is my responsibility. So that is something which I have to budget for, and I have to proactively do it. And a customer who's taking my product, for me, is my partner. So which means that it is always better to share the best practices to them so that they take this and then do it. They're not any other external entity. So in case if there's a breach happening in their environment because of my product, it could be their network configuration issues, but it is better we also educate them. And that is what you look at it in many of the, I would say the organization, they publish the security architecture, they publish these papers. It's not that, because they would want the users of the system also to be aware about it and use the system in right place. So responsibility for a product development team is to release the security patches on time, which is very important. Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you, Karthik, Amit, and Ashok for shedding light on the product lifecycle security. Its crucial elements such as architectural design, the deploying, testing, and operations, and other elements amongst them. For the next segment, we are moving towards a session on cyber physical systems. In today's evolving digital landscape, cyber physical systems have emerged as a critical field of study and innovation. The scope of today's discussion is to delve deep into the world of cyber physical systems, explore the challenges, opportunities, responsible practices, innovations, and perhaps look at the future trends that we see in this arena. Please allow me and join me in welcoming the panel for the same. We have Mr. Harinderjeet Singh Walia, who shall be moderating the panel. We also have Ms. Sapna Singh, Principal Security Architect at Honeywell. We have Mr. Lokesh Balu, Security Consultant at Dell IT, India. We have Sunil P, CISO at Capillary Technologies India Limited. We have Ms. Sujata with us, who's the founder of Besides Bangalore firm. Please welcome the panel.
Good afternoon, everyone. A difficult session before the lunch, right? But I hope and I know the enlightened panelists will keep it interesting. And with that, we will deep dive into the cyber physical systems discussion, and also known as CPS. So basically, when we talk about CPS, it can be considered as a fourth industrial revolution as well. And it's basically computer controlled algorithms that control physical systems and processes, enhancing the intelligent behavior of the systems, right? So that it is in the nutshell. So in our day-to-day life, we interact with multiple CPS systems, starting from, let's say, robotic vacuum in our home, okay? And then maybe when we are driving our cars, right? The modern day cars are also having autonomous systems like ADAS. That is also an example of CPS. Then more complex systems like avionics, okay, when the pilot already takes off and lands, and also there is a autopilot systems in the avionics, right? These are all examples of CPS. And also we interchangeably use IoT and CPS, right? Both the terms we interchange, but there is a slight difference between both. And obviously, next speaker will be explaining what is the slight difference and where it is. With this, I will hand over the mic to the panelist. Okay, so Sapna will walk us through the next, explaining what is CPS in more details.
Thanks, Hari. Hi, everyone. So in very simple term, cyber physical system combine physical and computational elements together to perform complex tasks. Right? They are also smart systems. Why? Because they collect data from different sources, sensors, physical environment, physical objects, and make decisions and perform actions in real-time environment, in real-time manner, and on real-time objects. They also adapt to certain conditions, for example, increase in noise level or increase in temperature, and perform accordingly. And architecture-wise or component-wise, if we talk about, they have actuators, sensors, physical uh, processes, computation, network, embedded systems, distributed networks, etc. And also, cyber physical systems are nowadays used with a lot of advanced technologies like IoT, cloud, AI, ML, big data analytics, automation, robotics, and they have become somehow part and parcel of our lives, right? Such systems are nowadays used in so many different sectors or domains. In medical sector, to improve the quality of the services, to improve the healthcare services. In autonomous vehicle sector, transportation, right? Smart cities, smart buildings, smart offices, smart airports, and so on and so forth. Even they are heavily used in critical infrastructure like smart grids or to distribute the oil and gas, or in transportation, in supply chain management, so and on and so forth. We can just keep talking about them. And especially if you look around, right, on a day-to-day basis, you interact with such systems, maybe ATM machines, right, and traffic signals. We see like street lights are turned on at a specific time during the evening. Also, the important of CPS systems are like in medical sector, as I talked about. Nowadays, there are so many wearable devices that doctors use to, know the status of health of the patients. Also for disabled people, and they are also used. You have heard about the robotics or robots doing the operations or surgeries, right? So these are some of the examples, and as I said, they have become part and parcel of our lives, and we are getting benefit out of them in so many different ways.
Yeah, correctly said. And also, when we are talking about CPS systems, uh, we can understand that IoTs are a subset of CPS, whereas IoT, for being an IoT system, it has to be connected to internet, right? Whereas CPS can have their own dedicated networks, need not to be connected to internet, but there are certain characteristics that a CPS should have. The main interesting characteristic that it should have is the software and the physical world interaction, right? In the sense, it should have sensors, okay, collecting data in real time, and on that, some control systems, algorithms will be there for decision making, and it should also have a physical component that will take the action, right, on the basis of the decision making. So the decision making will be done by the cyber component, okay, and the action will be performed by a physical system. Let it be, let's say, we see smart boom barriers, right? So you have your car, right, fitted with some QR code, and that when the car is going near the boom barrier, there are sensors that detect it, and according to that, there is an algorithm that is set what to do when it receives the correct QR code. Okay, and on that it acts, right? It opens or closes, right? So this is one of the important characteristics, and for further characteristics, I would hand over the mic to Mr. Lokesh, so he can walk you through.
Thank you. So as we saw a few examples about how CPS generally work, right? Let's try to step back and understand what's the evolution of how things work, right? If you look at the CPS arena, right, as our panelists explained, we have physical interaction, which is unlike the other traditional computer-based systems. The key change that happened in the last few decades is the introduction of computation and communication elements to the physical devices. When we say physical devices, we are trying to observe a physical phenomena in the field. It could be temperature, it could be humidity, it could be light, or it could be any other physical phenomena in any of our industrial process. In the earlier days, there was no direct computation and communication element tagged to it. But with the advent of computer-based analytics and decision making, we're adding these layers. Now, what this brings about is few important changes, which is essential for us to see how the traditional security elements can apply or laid over on top of it. One of that is most of these CPS domains and the devices have an embedded operating system, which means that they are not running on your traditional operating system or the software stack. They are probably running on bare metal operating system, right? The second aspect is they are almost real time in nature. They have to sense a signal, which is a physical phenomena, and then convert that physical phenomena, which is analog in nature, into a digital entity, and then process it, right? This is the sensor part of the physical phenomena. If you look at the actuator, which basically takes the digital signal and then converts back into a physical phenomena and apply on the physical process. So these two aspects have to work in real time. When we are talking about real time, we are talking about milliseconds and microseconds, because we are talking about industrial plants, nuclear plants, electrical subsystems, power grids, transmission entities, so on and so forth. And the third important aspect is most of these have a targeted firmware on which the functionalities are developed and deployed, which is also a new phenomenon which has been there, but with the addition of the layers called communication and computation and other analytics element, this gets really complicated. We'll probably touch upon a few more elements related to this, but I think these three characteristics at the minimum plays a significant role on how we are going to embed trust, resiliency, and eventually security.
Thank you, Lokesh, for the insights. So when we talk about CPS systems, as Lokesh clarified, right, the main component is real time, and there's a physical system that will act on it. Correct. So once we are designing this kind of systems, right, there will be a lot of challenges. Challenges may be in the form of technologies that is getting used, right? You are just not writing a software on a particular language, right? Here you are integrating the physical component with the software, and also there is something computing is coming in picture, right? So how you are deploying it? It can be a cloud deployed model, or real-time data is also coming in picture, right? So when we are deploying this in a vast environment, right, different type of environment, obviously we get security challenges, right? As we know, right, from our previous experience, we know that there are lots of systems that got attacked, right? From 2007 we can see the Estonian attack, right, wherein there was a mass DOS affecting the network that broke some of the critical infrastructure of the country, right? And there was stucknet which affected the ICS systems. So obviously there are lots of security challenges that would come up in such deployments of CPS, and on that part Sujata can help us, right? She can dwell more into it.
Hello everyone, very good afternoon. Yeah, obviously, thank you for raising all these attacks that you mentioned, and definitely with the very nature of these cyber physical systems, the interconnected nature of these components connecting with the digital technologies pose a very unique set of security challenges, right? So right from there are various ways how these security challenges can be looked at, but what I would do is I will take couple of attacks that took place in the real world, and then try to delve into how these what are the various ways these security challenges are in front of us, and how we can deal with it. Okay, so now there is one very there is something called Ukraine smart grid attack. Have you heard of this? You heard of this, right? Okay. So now if you try to analyze that a little bit deeper, so that did not start with the CPS system as a starting point, right? So how it all started? It all started with the spear phishing attack that was planted, uh, and the spear phishing attack was sent to the employees of the Ukraine smart grid employees. And when they opened that particular email, so there was a particular malware called black energy malware, which got downloaded, and that has a capacity to evade the systems, the detection systems, and also, perform a reconnaissance and also steal the passwords. Okay, and then make sure it establishes a remote connection to the critical infrastructure networks, right? So when it has established that connection, that is when they could control the subsystems in Ukraine, and they could open up the circuit breakers and created a catastrophic damage. It's not just about uh, the power down to the entire country, right? But what was that? What was the second thing that we should be looking at? So it has created a huge impact on the human lives. So there were many emergent critical systems like hospitals or various other things which were connected to that. And everywhere there was a disruption. That was a catastrophic effect, right? That's a endanger to the human lives, right? So when you're talking about the security of CPS systems, unlike the regular traditional models that we look at, right? So confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the systems and the information, we also have to look at a particular angle called the safety and stability of the human lives. Right, that's very important. So imagine somebody was talking about the Tesla S car. How many of you own a Tesla car here? Okay, if you had owned it in 2016, that was a different story all about. So that again, the problem there was not started with the control network or the CAN bus or the ECUs, right? So how it all started? In the infotainment software which they had it, so they figured out that that web browser is susceptible to a malware, and then that it has downloaded a malware, and then that could control the functioning of the entire car engines, right? And thereby it could control the car speed, brake system, everything. So again, it is a endanger to the life. If forget about what security controls that we should take about it, right? So then the recent attack in 2001, the water treatment plant in Florida, right? So there is something called sodium hydroxide, which we use to increase the pH levels, right? So when a particular hacker got connected to that particular network, he unauthorizedly accessed that water plant and increased the sodium hydroxide levels to the dangerous limits. What happens? Luckily, that particular system had a check at the end before it releases the water to the entire city. It used to do a check called pH level. Okay, so when the water is actually opening the gates to the city, it does perform a check called pH level. When it increases, it will automatically do. But then that's not the point, right? What if that system fails, right? So similarly, like this, how many of you are thinking that Apple AirTag is safer? And I know the technology innovation makes people more lazy, right? So I mean, we need everything on our table, isn't it? So how many of you are owning Apple AirTag? Thinking that you are delved deep into this technology, and our day-to-day life is completely tied to this trending technologies, right? So you might be thinking that buying an AirTag will actually save your if you miss something, if you misplace something, you can actually get your things back using the Find Me app, right? So but how many of you know that the very same device can also be used by a attacker, and then he can silently put it in your car and follow you, and like this there are 5 high-end cars were stolen. right? So we think that, you know, introducing this more technologies, is good, but then there are a lot of challenges how we can secure them. So there are various ways which we can do, starting from the Ukraine smart grid system that I have told, right? So it is impossible to have us 100% security inbuilt into it. So there are legacy systems, there are various ways in which you can do by doing threat modeling and things like that. Patching may not be sometimes possible, right? So let us see how we can make sure we can, safeguard these things in further discussions that we go. Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, in any security conference, what I observe is everybody always makes me frightened, right? With whenever we see technology and hackers, right? But we should also talk about solutions which can cater to this kind of technology. Obviously, we can't stop the technology; it will come. You have to use the technology, but obviously we have to take certain precautions that can help us use those, right? And no other, I think the best speaker for taking real-time steps to secure safeguard this kind of technology is our experienced almost CISO, right? Sunil, you can take over and help us.
Sure. Thanks, Hari. So I will quote one of the sayings from one of these conferences. One of the gentlemen from IBM had quoted, right? Safety is all about protecting humans from machines, and security is about protecting humans from machines, right? So safety becomes a primary concern when we talk about physical systems, but it's opposite when we talk about security, like you're protecting machines from the people, right? So there are two sets of contradicting ideologies that we need to ensure it gets conversed if we have to secure this. Now, safety becomes a primary aspect because it's human lives. As Sujata mentioned, there have been a lot of cases where we have seen machines have been tampered in order to lead to human lives, right? But what is the starting point for that? The starting point for all of those things are your IT systems. So protecting your IT systems also becomes critical. And one of the gentlemen previous sessions talked about defense in depth. So I would say that here also defense in depth plays a very primary role in order to ensure safety is there. We need to ensure that whatever measures we take are taken in each of these layers. In physical systems, we need to talk about physical barriers, fences, walls, whatever they have the standards. And come to IT systems, the basics of securing IT systems will still apply. One of the primary things is about inventory, right? Anything that we talk about security or identifying what are the measures, we need to have the inventory of it. We talked about SBOM. Similarly, here it will be bill of materials, right? So we'll have to talk about bill of materials from respect to what are the physical systems that is involved. It may be the hardware components. We have seen hardware supply chains issues happening. We need to understand what are the chips that is being used, from where the chips are coming in, right? So it also so important to understand the inventory of it. Similarly, from a software side, we need to have an SBOM. So inventory becomes a very critical aspect of it in order to understand what are the different ways we can secure it based on the inventory mechanisms. The next comes the risk management itself, right? So we get components from different vendors. It may be open source, it may be from experienced vendors or closed manufacturers, but still a risk management or third party risk assessment is very much required. We need to assess the third party who's supplying the components. It may be the software components, it may be hardware components. We need to ensure there's a quality check is happening. We need to ensure what is the components that is being put in. So we need to ensure that all this is taken care. But these can be taken care unless we understand the data flow, right? We need to understand how the data is flowing across from the IT systems into the physical systems. So this will help us to identify what component is performing at what level and then understand what is the risk there and if we have to do even more better evaluation of the vendor. The next and important thing comes is the threat modeling. We have been talking about the threat modeling, but I would say I would go one step ahead here, and rather than looking at a traditional threat model, I would say we should have to use AI or ML model in order to do a simulations, to do a simulation test to see whether what attack or what scenarios can be caused by changing a configuration setting, how is the impact that's going to happen, how the physical system is going to react. As Sujata mentioned, the pH level, the sodium level increased, right? How can that be avoided? Is it a possibility there where I can do a simulation and then understand, okay, if this parameter changes, okay, what does it results to, right? So these are some of the basic concepts, and I would hand it over to Lokesh to consider on the regulatory side of it.
Sure, thanks. So, as Sunil and rest of the panelists outlined, we have a unique challenge here. We cannot really deal with these protection or the mitigation in a straightforward manner. We need to have a different approach. But that doesn't mean that we need to go entirely out of the box. There is a lot of overlap and leverage that we can do from the traditional computer-based systems and the network protection. So with this context, let's look at this from a three-step approach, right? One is about prevention, the second is about detection, and the third is about mitigation, right? I don't think we cannot really do one approach here because of the diverse nature of the physical systems we are dealing with, right? When it comes to prevention, right, it is always better to really be proactive and do things much better. As Sunil outlined, inventory or the inventory is the key, because without inventory you cannot do identity, right? One of the key aspect here is there is a lot of standards around device identification or dev id, right? There are IEC standards and IEEE standards related to that. So it is important for most of the industries to start embracing this so that we have a structured and systematic approach to device identity, right? Similarly, in the prevention we can talk about, as an extension of inventory, is how are we doing patch management, right? This is most often overlooked problem, right? And when you have a traditional computing environment, you have agents deployed and which will give you a dashboard and probably near real-time status on how many of your assets are compliant or non-compliant. But when it comes to drivers, heterogeneous cyber physical systems, it's going to be challenging because deploying an agent to really find that out is going to be extremely difficult, and we cannot really have a common model agreed with them. So this also brings another interesting question of how can we really choose a vendor and onboard a vendor who can follow an industry standard best practice to support this inventory management and patch management process, right? One of popular model that can be used not only for these two areas but generally is what we call as the IEC 62433 standard, which is widely used in the in CPS and specifically in the IoT and ICS area, which are the key domains within the CPS. The other interesting and extension of that is what we call as the Prude model, right? It defines 5 layers of architecture. It talks about level 0, which is your sensors and actuators. It talks about level 1, talk with each other unless until it is from the same zone. Conduit is a concept where you allow a secure channel, something like your TLS if you can think of, so that you can establish a secure channel between the authorized and attested entities between each of these zones, right? So this is all about the prevent stuff. When it comes to detect, of course, you can think of the similar models, intrusion detection systems at the network level or at the host level. Now, if you just take the example of network intrusion detection, we run into a huge challenge with cyber physical system. The reason is we are talking about physical anomalies, the changes in the physical parameters of the process being monitored or the control system being monitored. Now, can we define rules which is equivalent to your computer networks where you talk about atomic signatures, maybe a bad IP, maybe a bad DNS sync and hole, right? But equivalent to that, we have to identify the anomalies in the physical process. Unless until we build an IDS system that has an ability to measure and detect these physical anomalies, your IDS in the CPS world is going to be, does not make any sense. Similarly, finally come to the mitigate part, right? This is where coordination with the system integrators, coordination with the system onboarding vendors, because we are using a lot of third-party sensors, third-party actuators. Without they following certain practices, without they following certain hygiene, none of this is going to work. And finally, the regulations. The regulations, if they are missing, none of the examples we talked about cannot be prevented. Take, for example, the electric grid, including in India, right? It's going to be really challenging for us unless we have all the electrical grids and subsystems follow a basic cyber hygiene. because most of their power grid systems are connected and computer connected or connected to a communication protocol that we are using in your IPv4 or IPv6 systems. So this becomes an important piece. For example, in the Western countries, they have what they call as North American regulation, right? NERC. So all the power grids are supposed to follow that. Whereas in our country and some of the other developing countries, a lot of these regulations are still emerging. That's what we need to look for. Very recently, 2020, the California is the first state in the US to pass IoT specific security laws, which means any IoT device that is connecting to internet should meet a minimum set of cyber hygiene, right? Otherwise, the vendor will be liable for that. So those are the types of thought process and regulations we should all think, so that as an ecosystem, we'll be able to really rise to the occasion and handle this.
Yeah, very rightly spoke. Basically, as a crux, we can make that we have to follow certain baselines, right? While we are designing a CPS system. If you don't follow a particular baseline and just randomly create CPS systems, we don't know where that CPS systems will be working, right? Maybe we have created an air tag, but we don't know where this air tag is going. Is it going to a military installation? Okay, that is hidden, maybe, right? So in that case, even though the government is hiding that particular location, but somebody using an air tag may reveal it, right? And similarly, when we talk about CPS, we are talking about smart cities, right? There may be uh, CPS systems deployed to control the traffic in the road, right? In the near future. So that is one of the element of smart city. Now imagine that particular system affected by state or non-state actors, right? What a havoc it can create if the system goes down on a busy Monday morning. Okay, and similarly, if the smart grids go down, right? So what kind of havoc? Because there may be certain situation. Let it be healthcare, right? Maybe some operation is going on or something is going on, health, and it stops, right? Uh, so these kind of things we have to avoid, right? While designing or developing certain CPS systems. Maybe Sunil can help in addressing what kind of challenges is being faced on that issue, right?
Sure. Thanks, Hari. So, as Lokesh mentioned and everybody of my other panelists mentioned, this is an integration between physical systems and IT systems. That means the skill set required in managing is interdisciplinary. And how many of us have this interdisciplinary skill set, right? That's the biggest challenge. Now, we may find SMEs in their own fields, but how do we bring them and integrate or communicate or collaborate with each other? As I mentioned, safety becomes a paramount in kind of a physical systems or ICS systems, but security or confidentiality integrity becomes a primary concern for a security person, right? How do we ensure that both of these are taken care? How do we talk about secure by design, right? Lot of these ICS systems come with remote connectivity to the vendors. How do we ensure that it is always secure in the design itself? When the product is being developed, what are the requirements? Why do the vendor needs to connect into it? Are we discussing those things? Now we talk about disaster recovery and BCPDR that we talk about, right? It's very easy in a software field. I bring up a cloud environment or I bring up a virtual environment and test it out. Is it possible in a physical system? It's too resource intensive, right? I need to build the entire systems, equivalent systems in a separate place. We'll have to move the people from here to there, right? So DR becomes a very, very, very difficult aspect. How can we ensure that is there a virtual way that we can test it out? That's one big challenge that we have. But the other thing is, as Lokesh mentioned, the patching, right? Patching is very easy in a software world. I put an agent, or I can bring a down. I can look at a downtime, and then bring up another component, patch this, then bring the other component down, bring this up. Right? There's zero downtime. Is it possible in a physical systems? Right? In physical systems are designed for long-lasting and always working mode, rather than in kind of evolving mode. So how do we ensure the firmware that comes in, we update it without ensuring there's a downtime? right? Over the updates that we are talking about, over the air updates, but even that will require a downtime. How do we ensure that the downtime is not there? So these are some of the challenges that we're talking about. The biggest challenge, as Hari mentioned, the nation state actors, right? Whenever we talk about connected systems, we usually talk about critical systems, critical infrastructure systems, which is the main target for nation actors. And how effective are we with the kind of thwarting their effect, right? Because they have all the resources to go and break into that. One single vulnerability can lead to the entire system being down. How effectively are we able to monitor it? Are our incident response plans effective enough to understand these scenarios? We talk about SOC, right? Security Operations Center. They keep monitoring 24/7, but they're all tuned to IT systems, an issue in the IT systems. Are they being evolved to understand what are the differences in a physical system will help them? Okay, this change in physical system means it's an attack. So we should raise the same equivalent severity like we do it in IT systems, right? So the basic thing I'm talking about is the human skill set. The skill set is the biggest challenge, and next is the technological advancement that also we need to talk about, because most of the security softwares that we talk about are work in isolations. Either they target the security or the safety of a physical system, or the safety of physical security of the IT systems, but convergence is not there. Right? I'll pass it on to Lokesh to talk about other regulatory issues or challenges that is there.
Sure. I think the skill set part we briefly touched, right, which is a very important challenge. Even before that, we need to understand how this is getting transformed from one area of computing to another area of computing. So we always look up to experts, right? We say that, hey, why don't you bring in a IoT expert or a medical device expert into the system and then ask him to do security about it, right? The traditional way of looking for people who are expert in security probably should have a relook. What I mean by that, there are a lot of experts within the domain. For example, if you talk about any nuclear plant or power plant or an electrical subgrid, right? There are specialists within them. The best approach or the optimal approach would be to pick them up who has a lot of system knowledge about how things work, and then inculcate this sense of risk into their mindset. Have them study the security processes, frameworks, regulations, and then have them apply to that. Probably that's the best way, because we always talk about talent crunch and demand and supply and all that stuff. So that is one thing about the skill set. The other thing about standards and regulations is, unless until there is a liability angle or there is a state level enforcement of all these regulations, like you have for insurance, you have IRDA. For your banking and finance, you have RBI. Similarly, for financial markets and securities, you have SEBI, right? We probably need sector-specific regulator. If we talk about electrical power grid, which is the most crucial one, I think we need to really have, I think there are discussions in the various levels in the government agencies to bring that. Similarly, if you look at nuclear power plants or other power plants, definitely we need to have that. So there is a lot happened in the Western world on some of these, and the enforcement of this, I think we have to do definitely a catch up on that. And finally, from a technology standpoint, a couple of things I would like to highlight. We talked about patching challenge, we talked about identity, inventory management issues and all that. So one emerging area within the cyber physical systems, especially IoT, is the remote attestation. So what this means is, when you're bringing in a device, we don't know whether it's a rogue device or an authorized device. One way to do is, there are a lot of emerging research in how can I remotely attest the device before it can become part of my CPS network, right? So there are mechanisms to do that. There are software-based attestation, there are hardware-based attestation, and there are hybrid approaches. For example, if you talk about hardware-based attestation, you can think of ARM trust zones or Intel SGX, the various other controls and tools available from the platform providers. Similarly, software-based attestation can also be thought about when designers and architects think about interactions with the cyber physical systems. I think we need a definitely holistic treatment, but just to summarize, these are the three areas in line with what Sunil called out and rest of the panelists called out, that's of paramount importance immediately.
Very rightly covered, Lokesh. Just to add on that, whenever any industry is trying to make a CPS, right? it is best to involve the stakeholders in the sense where it will be deployed, right? Because the stakeholder can give inputs. He might not give inputs about the software or the design, but he knows his work, right? He can say what parameters, if changed, can affect drastically, right? And that stakeholder needs to be involved during the design phase so that the developers don't have to rework it. And the systems, since these systems mostly will be integrated and very critical for any state or nation, right? So I think the best thing is, obviously threat modeling is an important part during the development stage, but after deployment, there should be a system for resiliency. The product should have a capability to introspect into what kind of instructions it is getting. Is it within the boundaries? Then it's fine. If it is not within the boundary, then there should be a secondary action that needs to be done by the product, right? And that needs to be integrated in the product codes, right? Because such an important critical infrastructure needs to be resilient. If it is not resilient, then obviously it makes no sense, and it can land up in multiple critical issues, right? That is what I think. And for the future trends, right? Obviously, the technologies, how much we avoid, it will come, and it's already coming, right? In the sense, every small things nowadays is smart. Even a bulb is a smart device which interacts with, let's say, eco devices, right? So we cannot run away from the technology. We have to embrace it, but while embracing, we have to know where to use it as a human point, and then the developers or the industry which is developing such devices should take the responsibility of maintaining it as well, because these devices may be deployed over systems which is not connected to internet, but may be critical, right? Then how do you do the patching? That is very important. As correctly said by the speaker before me about PDLC. Now PDLC and SDLC has to be there for any system, and the main part is till the time that particular systems are in existence or being maintained, that has to be maintained properly, right? Not on papers or maybe one or two systems. No, if you are doing patching, you have to reach out to the end devices within the time. And also you may be using a secure code for designing subsystems, right? But the vulnerabilities may pop up later, like as one of the speakers showed about heartbleed exploit. See, heartbleed exploit was already existing on the system, right? It came up on what not existing, but it came up in one of the code changes which happened, right? So, if such issues come after deployment of the product, there should be ability for the development team to quickly patch it without a downtime. That particular maintenance time or the reaction time should be there. Otherwise, we may end up in lots of issues, right? The future is CPS. It can be in the form of IoTs or other devices, right? Including inclusion of AI and ML will certainly add to it in the process of decision making. Already our government has already, Department of Science and Technology has already created a program, ICPS, Interdisciplinary Cyber Physical Systems, which is targeting into R&D and creating new CPS systems. So yeah, the future as per me is CPS. Anything to add on to this? Any of the panelists for the future?
Thank you. So as Hari rightly mentioned, innovation is, evolving, right? So technology advancements are taking place. That is inevitable, right? So right from the invention of the wheel to the internet age and the digital age that we are in today, so innovation keeps happening, technology advancements keep happening. Already in the CPS systems, we have seen plenty of trending technologies which are being used, right? So I would like to take one simple example and then leave to the audience to think through various other aspects how we can implement it. So now, for example, we were thinking about that smart grid system, right? So power plants. So how we can incorporate blockchain as a technology into this, and how we can use that technology into this smart grid system, right? So in the traditional power generator stations, what happens is that the traditional power generator stations produces the energy, and then that is given to the utilities vendors for them to distribute it across the cities, right? So there is an intermediary which is playing, which is a utilities company, right? So now how blockchain technology can be used here is that if by integrating this into a renewable energy, like attaching this to the solar system, solar panels, so each consumer can excessively produce the energy, and then instead of giving this or supplying this to a utility to distribute it, they themselves can take part in this blockchain, and then sell this energy to another consumer who are in need of this, right? So effectively, we can use a blockchain technology to avoid this intermediary, to become a transparent, to become a more secure and trustworthy, right? So do you think that by introducing this blockchain, are we going to secure this? Is it 100% secure? No, right? So, no, not a single system is 100% secure. There are always negative aspects or other aspects where we can try to find loopholes to break the system. There is something called 51% attack. So, where hackers, when they could get control over the 51% of this network, and they can easily break that system, right? So, while integrating these technologies into the CPS systems, it is also very, very important to think of the privacy aspects of it, right? So privacy is another very big angle. So in normal days, I mean, before the blockchain came into the existence, now if I ask any audience, Miss, what is your bank balance? Will you say, what will you do? Immediately you either come and slap me, right? So what nonsense are you talking? How dare you ask me that, right? But then now today, if I ask any of the technology users, sir, how many bitcoins are you holding? So they will immediately say, to showcase that we are in the technology. I am advanced. I'm using this technology. They'll say, I am having 5 bitcoins. So now, didn't he reveal his net worth of how much bank balance is he holding? Right? So we should use the technology wisely, and also make sure it is taken care from a 360-degree angle. So similarly, the very nature of these CPS systems is that it is very much close to or dependent on the real-time data, right? So, and it generates more and more data. So we need to have technologies like quantum computing. We need to have technologies like edge computing to process these. We need to have technologies like 5G to build the smart cities, right? Smart hospitals, smart whatnot, anything to make it smart. So we need to make use of these technologies to the extent possible. Make sure that these are secure. But again, we are saying that quantum computing is the go-to thing. So quantum encryption. But the other side of quantum encryption, we are not realizing that itself will undermine the already proved secure encryption algorithms like AES 256 and SHA 256, right? So using that computational power itself, we can break these systems, right? So, but we need to leverage the technologies. I mean, there is more time we have at our hand. So it is up to us how we want to use these technologies. There is no fixed standard framework for each and every CPS system that is designed. So if a CPS system is there in place, so we need to make sure we understand the requirements and the end goals of that particular system, and make sure we come up, understand and do the threat modeling for that particular system, and make sure we create a secure products. So the onus is on us, right? So let us make the future secure, making use of all these trending technologies. Let's not fall prey for these technologies, but then let's be the digital cyber warriors in securing these CPS systems. Thank you.
Very correctly said. With this, I will open the floor for the questions. If anyone has some questions. No questions? Okay. Okay. So yeah, with this we can end the session. Yeah. One question.
Data insurance. Okay. I hope you're talking about the insurance angle of the cybersecurity, right? See, when it comes to cybersecurity, there are some invested methodologies because there is a risk assessment fundamentals are strong, right? There is also an actuarial data which is which is the basis for the insurance agencies to declare the premium and assets. But when it comes to CPS, right, there is no actuarial data behind the scenes that can drive this conversation. But it's pretty early. But I think once we have more stability in the cybersecurity of the IT systems, then probably it will get extended into the OT systems. But I think, in my personal opinion, the fundamentals of actuarial study is primary before even any insurance can spread into that. But you're right, it is required because it's one of the mitigating factor until we have an ecosystem of protection come into place. Maybe if anybody wants.
Yeah, absolutely correct. As we discussed, CPS has real-time data, and it can be a big data, right? The storage of the data is very, very important. And how do you store it, right? Because data aggregation can obviously affect the privacy, right? As Sujata covered. So it's a very important aspect. Again, it brings out that since there is no standards, right, created yet for CPS, so maybe that's a food of thought for creating a standard, right? Till the time there is no standard, we cannot ask anyone to meet that requirement. Any other questions? Yeah, I think we can end the session then. Yeah.
All right, thank you panelists for a very enriching and fruitful discussion on the theme. I believe we started the day with discussing core considerations on the product security. We have delved deep into, what cyber physical systems look like. There have been discussions around incident response, lifecycle security. It's been a great day so far. Just following the momentum of the conversations going, we have day 2 planned for the best practices meet at Conrad Bangalore tomorrow. We invite you to join the sessions. The registrations are still open just in case if you have missed it. We are carrying forward the momentum of security and privacy discussions going, and we request you to register if not already. All right, as we conclude the Product Security Sub-Summit, I extend our deepest appreciation to all distinguished speakers and panelists. Your expertise, insights, and willingness to share your knowledge have been instrumental in shaping the conversation and making the Sub-Summit a knowledge-rich platform. To our participants and attendees, thank you for your active participation. Your questions, contributions, and feedback have been of immense value to our discussions, and we hope you have found this sub-summit very enriching and informative. A special note of thanks for our hosting partner, Tata Consultancy Services. Thank you, Swanita and team, for helping us, to plan out the sub-summit, to execute it with this streamlined way, with this fluency. Thank you so much. Thank you.